I want to welcome everyone to the Education Committee and remind everyone to please turn off their cell phones or Blackberries off the table, please, because they will allow us to hear feedback and it becomes rather bothersome. Also, those committee members that are accessing their computers, you should know it so that they can access the materials from the board meeting versus watching the scores in the baseball game. I don't think baseball's playing yet today, is it? I don't know. So the agenda calls for public comment, and anyone that wants to have public comment, there are there are papers in the back. And Lisa, could you identify yourself so anyone that would like to speak on public comments, they should give them to you, please. I'm going to also ask everyone to remember that this is an official meeting of the Medical Board of California, and that I would expect that the decorum that is afforded the people in the meetings generally will be afforded here as well. And I will use the option of shutting down the comment section if it gets out of hand, but we'll go for 2 minutes for starts with public comment unless we see that there's another need for that. And, I said, give it to Lisa, you want it? It's okay? I'm sorry. So we're going to call the meeting to order and ask for Lisa to please call the roll.
Dr. Diego, Dr. Levine, present. Dr. Solomon, here. Ms. Shipsky, here. And Ms. Yaroslavsky.
Here. So we have a quorum present. Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment slips that I'm not aware of? We don't, so we'll continue with the meeting. I need an approval of the meeting from July 19th, 2012, Education and Wellness Committee. Are there any additions or subtractions or corrections or anything?
So moved.
Second, please. Second. And any public comment? No? So thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. So that happens. It's done. So we're going to move to item number 4 in your packet, an update on the outcomes for the Medical and Pharmacy Board's joint forum to promote appropriate prescribing and dispensing. And I'm going to ask Ms. Harold from the Pharmacy Board, as well as Ms. Whitney, our Executive Director. Welcome back, Ms. Whitney. It's good to see you walking around, to come forward and give us an update.
Good morning, and thank you for having us here this morning. The most important thing that came out of the forum is the working together of the Board of Pharmacy and the Medical Board of California, the joint cooperation to put together a forum of this nature took a lot of staff work, and we didn't have one argument in who was going to do what. We split the duties and share of everything, and it was just a tremendous effort and would not have happened if we didn't have such wonderful staff who are working on this, and the commitment from both boards to ensure that the day worked really well and that the information got out. In terms of the important aspects for the Education Committee, we learned a lot at the forum, and I want to thank a number of the board members who were able to be there. We actually had 5 board members from the medical board, and I think pharmacy had...
We had 5.
Yeah, so that was... Yeah, I think you had one extra. But in terms of the educational aspect of the forum, we found out that we do need to spend more time educating our licensees about cures, about what they need to know and what they need to tell their patients, both the prescribers and the dispensers. The communication needs to be improved, and we also need to spend some effort in educating our consumers, the patients out there, who need to understand what it means when you get a prescription, to ask the right questions, and what you do with the leftover drugs that you did not take. You know, what are the avenues of returning those drugs instead of just putting them in your cupboard and having the potential for someone else to use those. So there was a lot that came out of it. In your packet, and I'll let Ms. Harold speak in just a second. In your packet, there's a lot of information just from the forum in terms of who attended and some of the highlights. And on page EDU 4-2, you'll see some of the educational needs. But before we go into specific issues, I'd like to ask Ms. Harold to make some comments about her views of how the forum went and some of the items that came out of that.
Well, again, I want to appreciate the opportunity that we had with the medical board to do this, because it's really, at least these two boards have a very strong joint collaboration needed in this area for the benefit of the public as well as our licensees. And we are both being watched because as the primary prescribers and the primary dispensers, we have a huge role here in the area of prescription drug abuse that has just literally gone right through the roof. So I think we have ongoing efforts that we need to do in the area. Sometimes when you go to forums, you go to them, people walk out, they're kind of like lukewarm, they come and go. We actually had people that came in the room, they stayed in the room, and I think they were listening. Now, some of them may have both been, we certainly had one revoked pharmacist in the room. I don't know how many others were in the room, but he showed up with his attorney. And you may have had a couple of your problematic physicians in the room as well, because sometimes they want to see what the regulator is saying after the fact. But there were a lot of other people in the room that had never heard this information before, and I think that that is a huge benefit. So I'm delighted we did it. I just think that given the positive reviews that we might want to consider what we were talking about during and what we were asked to do during the forum itself is perhaps look at another 6 months out, maybe doing one in Southern California. And I think that the caliber of the speakers needs to remain at the same level, because unless we have the speakers and we keep moving at a very lofty level, it can become just another forum, and we lose our real strength, I think, in really getting thought-provoking concepts in front of our licensees, which is really where we're going, and rethink a little bit how you're prescribing or how you're dispensing. There is a lot of material that's out there right now for the public, for licensees. There's a lot of data that's out there now that maybe needs to be packaged better so that's more digestible, I suppose, for our licensees. And I think that's one place we may want to go. Before we came to this meeting, we produced photocopies of just a couple of the government sites and then one from Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma, the drug companies do wonderful glossy things, but they come with a little bit of a taint, let's call it. Purdue Pharma, which produces OxyContin, has produced a lot of public ed materials. They've got a very aggressive public outreach campaign to protect their marketing and their product. But we have a number of things, so I'll share those with the committee as we proceed. I think our difficulty in moving forward is I'm not sure the same brochure works for pharmacists that would for prescriber. I'm not sure whether or not we want to go into the area of appropriate pain management, which is a whole different thing. But we do have educational ideas about don't buy drugs from somebody you don't know. Don't flush your drugs down the toilet. Find an appropriate way to clean out your medicine cabinet. And those of you that have kids, just don't leave your drugs in the cabinets where they have access, because much as you love them, they're going to do things you don't like. So I think there's educational moments in some of that. But I would, from the board side, and we have our public ed meeting next week and then followed by a board meeting in about 3 weeks, I believe based on our attendees, and our president unfortunately had a huge conflict and could not even make this, we're very interested in continuing this. I will tell you that we've got some dates already set up with the Drug Enforcement Administration to do part of what they've been doing nationwide already. They're in August 16th and 17th in San Diego, and August 18th and 19th in San Jose. They're 1 day, but they're 2 days back to back. But they're intended as separate 1-day forums. It's just they're going to run 2 of them, and we're going to publicize these. And this is just essentially what Mr. Ranzanese spoke about. You could see his PowerPoint. He wanted 2 hours. He could have probably had 4. And then we get up and we talk a little bit about corresponding responsibility. So those are aimed at pharmacists. I think physicians may be interested, so I'll share the dates and make sure that Ms. Whitney knows it so that we can share those. Yes?
I can't help but think of other prescribers, and who I'm thinking of in part would be oral surgeons. I am surprised how many of my patients, when I get their drug history, how how much vitamin we get
Oh, I
from
know.
a wisdom tooth extraction. And I'm also thinking PAs have, I know they're supposed to be under supervision, but they have a fair bit of autonomy, and DOs who are obviously prescribers, and we can only think of one high-profile case. So
I think we all went there.
And I think for this initial form, we weren't sure, first, how many people would sign up, the interest at both the pharmacist and physician level. We did, in fact, get a few nurses, PAs. We didn't get any dentists who came that registered. But we didn't expand our focus because, again, we weren't sure. I think for any additional, we certainly want to, but also when we look at our educational materials, we want to ensure that some of our educational materials be more broadly directed so we can share it with the nursing board and dental board, that they could actually post it on their website, put it in their newsletters, very generic kinds of information that wouldn't be maybe physician specific. Dispensers, a little bit different, although we do have some physician dispensers and dispensing going on in clinics, so physicians need to know about that. But I think what this committee here in helping us set priorities and giving us direction on in terms of developing materials would help us look at the generic side and when we should engage some of the other licensing boards, because I do agree with you that that's important.
Dr. Levine?
Two things. First of all, I've been to a lot of CME meetings, and this was by far one of the most informative. The quality of the speakers and the quality of the content was outstanding. And what I think one of the things that made it so successful was the tone. This was a forum devoted to the 99% of physicians and pharmacists who desperately want to do the right thing. There was no blame, you people are killing people attitude, either explicitly or implicitly. And what it did was create a tremendous openness among the participants to hear the message and to actually reflect how desperate they were for quality information. And Ginny, I think you're absolutely right that one of the challenges around the use of or restricting the use of opioids to where there's evidence that it makes benefit is that for patients with chronic pain, the number of options, effective options for treatment are actually quite limited. And so the instinct to default, if you will, to narcotics has been encouraged, has been promoted, and the physicians that I talk to on a daily basis say, I get it, I don't want to be doing this, I don't want to be creating dependence, I don't want to be creating addiction, certainly, but I'm stuck. Motrin goes only so far. And so the non-farm, and this is not the topic of this subject, but the issue of investing in education and research actually on non-pharmacologic treatment of pain, living with chronic pain, is an issue for the profession. As more of us are living much longer, we're living with chronic conditions that are often associated with pain. And the number of treatment or therapeutic options are actually quite limited other than drugs, pharmacologic agents. They certainly play an important role. But I think we've got the attention of the prescriber and dispenser community in California. And one of the things that people ask for at the end is all my colleagues, all my partners should have had the chance to come here. So I think you'll find a very receptive audience, particularly if you can, as you said, keep the level of the speakers at this level.
Dr. Salmonson?
We can't redo the symposium here, but I was struck by the comment, maybe I just heard it, that I think some of the information that physicians got from the previously mandated 12 hours of pain was that it was safe to keep ratcheting up the opioids, and that we were bound by that pain scale, and we just had to get that report down to like a 4. And it was up there with temperature and pulse. We thought we could regulate it the way we can blood pressure, and that, I think we found out from this seminar, was based on a very limited number of patients. It wasn't the chronic pain out in the community kind of patient, and I think we had a false sense of how much opioid we could and should prescribe. So I think, yes, that was hugely important information, and that's huge. And I can't remember which speaker pointed that out, but that study that we've all kind of relied on is very limited.
I want to take a minute and also compliment you on the on what went transpired. But I think that we all have to remember that this was the first attempt at doing this, and now we have learned our lessons and best practices. The need to expand the audience and expand the access to the site, be it remotely, be it GoToMeeting, whatever the computer technology is that's available. But to listen at the Senate BNP Joint Committee meeting that even optometrists have the ability to prescribe was, I had no idea. But anyway, but it's not only, it's everybody that's prescribing needs to have this information, because then those boards will be able to disseminate and share that information. We have to have a coordinated message, and we have to take the time to do this right. What happened, it was great. But now we've learned, I think, that we have a whole huge, bigger responsibility. And if we were able to bring together 5 or 6 boards, in fact, and I'm not so sure insurance companies shouldn't be part of the conversation, because they're the ones that are currently mandating that 40 Vicodins are prescribed, and they are paid for $5 when you go to your oral surgeon, which is ludicrous. So in addition to the, I think that everyone needs to be there, and I would just recommend that we try and make sure that everyone is at the table, and we make sure that we have some kind of an organized campaign. Maybe staff gets together with all of the different bureaus and boards that have the ability to prescribe, and take a look at how best to roll this plan out and just make it happen, so that and we have some real major push, and we get some major push from the media. And all of the health editors from all of the newspapers up and down the state should receive links to what happened and in future things. So we need to do what we did. You guys really have to be complimented on what happened, but we've got to now, we can't let that come down from the 30,000-foot view. We have to continue to keep it at that high level, and I would look forward to helping you if I can be of any help, as I'm sure any of the members on this committee would be as well.
One of the things that I think that we've got the interest. I keep forgetting we're webcasting. I think we've got the interest of the other boards. That we had the optometric board there. We had people from the Board of Registered Nursing there. I don't know about the dental board. I don't remember that there was someone there. But one of the things that I think we need to pursue maybe in the future, if it's something that works on your end, one of the recommendations that the literature out there is encouraging pain contracts, where you go to one physician, you have one pharmacy. There's a joint area there where we can show examples of pain contracts. We had started pulling it because initially, I'm not even sure you are aware of some of this. When we started this process, we were going to do what's appropriate pain management. And we were talked out of that one really early, like our first coordination meeting was the people that know it aren't going to come. The ones that don't know it think they know what they're doing, and they're not coming either. So, so we kind of looked at, and at the same time, the prescription drug abuse was just skyrocketing, and cures funding became an issue. So we were in the right place at the right time with the right product, which timing's everything in life. But
well, the intractable pain has already been, I think, dealt with by the medical board exceptionally well, and I think that those doctors, as you say, are very well aware. We maybe need to get the message out that those doctors are doing their job, and their patients need to realize that they need to stay on top of that too. But we can always do better with patient advocacy and education. But I think that we've gone down that route. Let's make sure that we are bringing everybody to the table that needs to hear this message. The message is excellent, and people are clamoring. I mean, these parties that go on, and they're farmer parties, they exist, and we need to understand that, and kids die.
Here are some handouts I'm going to hand out. There is a bill, it may be a spot bill at this point, that uses the phrase intractable pain. They're going back in and putting intractable back in. So
Well, it's a good word to use.
yeah, they're putting it back in.
I don't know what the bill's going to say. We'll hear about that later, I'm sure. We might not like the bill.
So some of these items that are being passed out, what we want to ensure is in the education of our prescribers, dispensers, and the consumers, that we're not reinventing the wheel. There are many publications out there that are very good, very useful, and there's no reason that we can't use them or incorporate some of the information into our newsletter to help explain different information. What I did notice that we didn't ask when we did the evaluation, we were very good in asking, would you be able to use anything you learned in your practice, and would you? Are you going to change your practice based upon something you learned here? We didn't ask the follow-up question, and what is that you're going to do differently? So we learned that from what we had. But when 71% strongly agree that there's something that they learned that's going to change or impact their practice, that's a very important item, and we need to then do some more follow-up to find out, what it is and how we can promote that to other prescribers and dispensers. If you're going to do something different, how can we move that forward to other individuals who might make a difference in their practice? But we didn't ask that follow-up question.
Ms. Whitney, do you think that it might be advantageous to survey those people that have to deal with enforcement issues on all of these boards as to what are the priorities of, let's say, the top 5 issues that get people into trouble in their profession as far as it relates to prescribing? And see if that we could address it from an educational perspective through our newsletter, how best to, so again, not to when you said not to reinvent the wheel, that's all of a sudden that popped up in my head.
So in looking at page 4.2 and some of the other information that we've gotten from our evaluation and looking at the materials that have been passed out, for this committee, we're looking at what we can do to educate and where we want to go with the education before we start setting a date for another forum. We want to have some direction in education. And it's going to be a joint education because we want to ensure that the underlying issue of physicians working with pharmacists and feeling comfortable working with one another and discussing the issues of prescription that comes in, that we want to promote that interaction. And that was one of the major items that we wanted to get across to those who came to the forum, that the other licensee is not your enemy. The other licensee is your partner. And we want to help establish that partnership and that they are partners in the health care for that patient. And it's very, very important that they see each other as partners. And we've had incidents in the past where they haven't quite seen themselves as partners. So we'll be looking at how we can help promote that. But there are a number of other things. So first we'll start with the handouts that Ms. Harold provided you so we can go through those.
Well, I don't think we need to spend valuable committee time going through these unless you really are interested in doing so. You go up almost any website, all of these but one are government-run websites. And there is a lot more material. We just did quick hits, literally very quick hits. One of them, this one right here, deals with how various practitioners and pharmacists can work together, which was right down our alley, and we hadn't seen it until this morning, frankly. So there's so much out there. I think maybe part of what we can do is steal from the best and kind of do what we can there. But I think I don't want to take committee time unless you want to do that. And I saw a couple head shakes. So
just a comment again on cures. That was the other thing I learned. There's that one person working cures. I mean, where are we? Because that. What can we do to try to encourage that? Because we're all kind of relying on that now. I mean, I'm stunned that one person is trying to keep that afloat. I knew they were underserved, but that's...
Well, there's some political things, as you might imagine, when it's a very expensive program. But it's essential. It's actually cheap compared to what the lack of the knowledge is. And in fact, it's in our opinion, we've been there much like the medical board from the beginning, back in the mid-1990s. This program, and were you at the medical board in 1990? 1990s? 94? Okay, well, that was just about the time the bill went through, where we started looking at cures as a means to differentiate between those that are abusing prescription drugs or controlled substances and those that need the controlled drugs. And the goal was to separate the two.
Right.
We are on the precipice of being able to reach that. And but we need a new computer system to do it. And I think the amount of money that they're telling us, at least the last estimate I saw, was $1.6 million coming from the practitioner boards to fund it. Then they're looking at reestablishing the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement, which is a slightly different issue. That isn't cures. That's going out in the field with field agents, which is a valuable option. But I'm not sure we should be funding that as regulatory boards. But with that going on, we need a new computer system. And as I said, it's just like what happens when we get pulled over. Give us a system that you can run our license plate. In this case, you can run the prescription. You can see who that patient is in front of you. Our guys can see who that patient is when they come in to get it dispensed. And if it's even reasonably close to online real time, we'll have the information and the data we need. We just need a new computer system to do that. And I think part of the service would be more than that one person who's been temporarily assigned over in DOJ. There's also some education that needs to go on around that so that the people that call in are getting, this is what the law requires, and this is what you need to be doing, because there's a lot of lack of information, because as the program shifts from one unit to another, that information base that was once in the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement is no longer there, and it's not quite yet up with the cures unit.
And we will have a further discussion at our executive committee because the bill will be presented to you. So that's really where we want to discuss that issue.
So let me suggest to you that on an outcomes expectation of this committee having something to do beside sit and listen to these informational reports and resources, that could I ask staff, both staffs possibly, to come back, let's say, with a top 10 or top 20 issues, and that we could take a look at coordinating through the newsletter, just a blast, a point, either a blast on the website, a blast on the computer thing, so on the newsletter. So if it was on responsible returning of drugs to where, and the number to call to get that information or something, so that would, physicians, they don't have a whole lot of time. I know that they enjoy reading the back page of the paper, from what I understand, but something that's not what I
People Magazine.
People Magazine apart. But what I'd like to see is some kind of a blast on the front section, maybe one or two tips to tell doctors and pharmacists this week, this month, this quarter, that this April is Take Back Your Drugs month, and all pharmacies within the city limits of X, Y, and Z counties are available. So direct your patients to something where patients can take responsibilities, doctors and pharmacists can take responsibilities, because patients have heard from their doctors or their pharmacists. Did you know that you can do this today? I'm refilling a prescription at my pharmacy. Did you know that next month you can bring us any of your unused prescriptions? Something that patients, so people can hear.
The difficulty is you cannot bring in any Schedule 1 or 2 drugs. You can't.
Well, I'm not suggesting what the rules are. I'm just saying, can you give us some information?
But that's one of the crux of the problems, is that it's the unused narcotics and other things that are not being disposed of. We've got a whole issue about unused birth control and other things getting into the water system, but because you have to have a law enforcement agency present when you in fact bring these other medications in, it really prohibits where they can be dropped off. Because we've tried it in Long Beach, we had to actually have the police department sitting there doing it when you brought it up, because there's a whole issue about chain of custody to make sure that the drugs are properly disposed of. We now have a hazardous waste place that, again, there's some limitations as to what can be brought over there. So I just say it's something we need to address. I think we talked about it 2 sessions ago. It's a practical thing, and maybe this board can work with pharmacy board.
If this is the number one issue, then let me ask staff then to bring back what I was only giving an example of of something I didn't know what I was talking about to be put in the newsletter where everybody could understand and get a message from somewhere. But if this is the number one issue of how do you dispose of it, that's not real hard. We can bring in some people and get some answers and make a policy and make it happen. I don't think it's so hard. Let's put it that way.
So I'm going to make an analogy to gun control.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same.
Because the process of what they call the take-back programs is pretty much the same as bringing guns in for exchange for money. Not that people get paid for bringing their drugs, and I don't.
Sometimes they do.
Oh,
Pathetically, sometimes they do.
okay.
Get a gift certificate from a.
Well, so but the point being that, like guns, there are 250 million guns in the possession of individual citizens at the moment in the U.S. So the take-back programs are a piece of it, but there's a prevention piece also, which is decreasing the flow of likely to be unused drugs into the supply, into the stream of available for use. There's the disposal piece, which is expensive, and I think now we've got twice a year take-back programs because of the requirement for peace officers to be there and for chain of custody, as Jerry said. And then there's the should you be prescribing this in the first place for someone who does not have pain related to cancer? And so I'm not sure that there's a number one, but there are several that compete for first place. And so a sequence, I think you're absolutely right, a sequence of articles and placement on the website is a great idea. And doing it in bite-sized pieces so that
exactly.
people can digest the information.
So it's like that zap message in the cartoon when you read the comics. Well, at least it used to be there when I read the comics. There was like a zap message above the guy's mind.
Yeah.
And it had, 5 words, 7 words,
Oop, cultural illusion.
whatever it's called, some kind of a blast and some kind of a thing. Or an article, but I'm just suggesting that if we should do a coordinated campaign, is what I'm looking for, is if staffs could get together and figure out what are the top issues that we can address, use our technology that we have anyway, and bring it back. But
Yeah.
I would venture to say, if it is the number one issue is the quantities that are being prescribed, insurance companies have got to be at the table because they may not mandate that you have to have 40 Vicodin when you have your tooth pulled. The insurance, when you go to the pharmacy to fill that prescription, they give it to you and then you say, why are you getting so many? Because if it's not the insurance company, then let them come and tell me that it's not. Let them come into the room. Let them be part of this discussion.
Well, part of the problem is, I think, some of the way insurance plans work, they pay X amount for a prescription. And so, yes, it seems like the patients do want more because if they've already paid it, they need 10 or they need 20. They'd rather get 20 at one time because they'll pay a flat amount. But I don't know if that's true for drugs.
I think we need to hear some facts. Okay, I think all I'm suggesting is we need to hear some facts. So I would venture to say
Fact.
I have a fact.
Oh, good. Okay.
So the way, and I do this as my day job, the way drug benefits are written, the benefit is up to 30 or 90 days for a single copay. That's the way they're written. That does not compel the prescriber to write for a 90-day supply. It is up to the physician who holds that license to say, you only need 5 days of pain management. I'm not writing based on what you're allowed under your benefit. This is not an insurance company issue. This is an issue of the way prescribers think about, I think sometimes very well intentioned. Well, it won't cost you any more, so I'll give you as much as the insurance company will allow. But there is no insurer who mandates a 90-day supply.
Okay, I'll trust your knowledge on that, but I would just suggest that somehow we have to stop the stem of unnecessary drugs going to the household, sitting around in a medicine cabinet, young people coming and taking the meds, dumping them into a punch bowl and drinking the Kool-Aid. So whatever, and then being able to return it. So I'm just saying I'm not here to address what the priorities are. You guys are here to address the priorities and bring that back. So that's what I'm asking. Okay?
And we jointly with the pharmacy board will work on those priorities and also incorporating, reaching out to the other licensees that prescribe to do an effort to find out how we can broaden this public information and licensee information, but also how we can jointly work together, because they should be involved in our next forum. So that will be something that we can develop between now and the next meeting of this committee.
Madam Chair, though, I think there's another component we are not even talking about, which is what hit the paper, and that is when the medical board does have a case of physicians prescribing or over-prescribing, or and we talked about the need to have the coroner report to the board, is the death related to, and I think those need to be, from the board's perspective, I think the top issues. We've got to figure out, do we need additional regulations? Do we need something in law that allows the board to perhaps impose a stricter penalty when, in fact, a physician has wrongly prescribed over a period of time, or if
Or stop practice of prescribing specific drugs until it's determined that it's appropriate.
Because I think the other things are very important and they need to be done, but I think the major role of this board really has to look at, are we in fact doing the best we can for consumer protection on this particular issue about overprescribing, maybe wrongly prescribing, and the fact that we've got consumers that are very concerned that physicians who have been found to do this, the license hasn't been taken away, and they continue to practice. So that at some point needs to be seriously addressed.
And that was actually an issue that came up during the Sunset Review hearing. What do you do to expedite the discipline for those prescribers that are obviously over-prescribing, that you've done your investigation? How do you get them out of practice faster? But also, what are the other elements that you need to do to enhance the law to take care of this issue? And I think some of those we are dealing with in Sunset Review as questions that have already come up, but we're also working with committee staff to see if there are other opportunities. And I know there's a great interest by other members of the legislature to do something that might expedite the process for those prescribers that are obviously doing something based upon the investigation that you need to get out of practice quicker.
I would echo Ms. Shipsky's remarks and caution us all to realize that the legislature is not always the best writers of laws for the professions, and that we might want to make sure that we're being proactive about ensuring that what laws we'd like to see on the books for public protection are on the books, and it's not a trickle down, it's got to be organic trickle up.
Well, and quite honestly, that's been the focus with the board, on the board. It has been the issue of, are we adequately protecting the consumer when we can identify a physician has overprescribed, prescribed wrongly, or that a death has resulted because of prescription medicines. And so I think we need to step up and figure out, by talking both of the physician community, but the pharmacy community, not pharmaceutical community, about how we can craft things that will better protect patients on this issue.
And Ian, if there's one area where I think we need to actually focus in with laser-like precision is on the issue of what our colleague from the DEA called the dealers. And overprescribing is a very broad category. There are people who are overprescribing because they've been taught that you need to give people enough for 6 months because they may be in pain for 6 months, versus those physicians, the small number, the 1% he described, who set up a business intentionally selling prescriptions for opioids. And reading cases, you can clearly distinguish the pill mill physicians. And if there's a role, I think, for legislation that may be more rapidly responsive, it's in the circumstance where someone is intentionally subverting the intent of the Medical Practice Act and selling prescriptions for pain meds. And I'm obviously not going to write language here, but as opposed to a physician who needs re-education on how you treat pain and the appropriate role of narcotics. But
So let me ask you to that point that you just raised, the doctor that prescribes 6 months' worth of prescriptions to someone just in case they need it. Should there not be some kind of law in place that says, a rule, a standard of care rule that says that for this kind of medicine, we need to see the patient this amount of time with some regularity? And is that not the responsibility that this committee should be talking about as far as education and opportunities for rules and regs, that if you're going to be prescribing these things, that you have to come back and see,
and
the patient has to come back and see you, otherwise they're not going to get this. I don't mind the 6 months if you really have that kind of need, but I do mind the doctor that's not seeing the patient prescribing for 6 months and then 5 months, 0.9, the patient is something's happened.
I believe we do have, the medical board has published, and physicians are very well aware
I hope so.
of the frequency with which they need to see patients, and there is growing understanding of the role of urine drug testing to rule out diversion and pain contracts.
I hope you're right, but I would just like to know that.
Described.
And some of these businesses that are set up do follow those procedures. They just don't happen to see the patients. In the same way that a treating physician would see a patient. They may see them as they're collecting their check for prescription and paying their bill. But thank you. We'll put that on our list.
I'd just like to add 2 points. First of all, the controlled substances and whether they're classified in Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, in part, is based on the frequency with which and the closeness of the monitoring that the I guess society or the law requires for the practitioner to exert over a patient. So, for example, in the case of a narcotic that's in Schedule 2, you have to see the patient every single time that you write the prescription, or you can give 2 advanced prescriptions. You can write, you can hand the patient 2 additional ones. You can fill this not before March 1st. You can fill this one not before April 1st, but that can only go out 90 days. There's really tough requirements out there, but the problem is the quantity isn't restricted, and those that are going to violate the law are going to find ways around it. So that's an issue. And with response to your comment, I think it's very important that I close the loop here. April 27th is the next drug take-back day. So we're already starting to promote that. That's a big deal because we don't have another DEA drug take-back scheduled for the fall, in part because they released what they believe are going to be their ultimate regs for the disposal and take-back of controlled substances. It took them, 2.5 years, maybe 3 years to get there. We provided comments back. They're not done yet with where they're going. And there's a bill going through the legislature to encourage pharmacies to take these items back. And the
county of Alameda actually has legislation that is actually putting a surcharge so that
Right.
Take-back disposal can actually be paid for by the pharmaceutical industry.
And I believe that's one of the elements that they're looking at in this bill, too, because the funding for it is also an issue in how you're going to fund it. But a lot of pharmacies will do this voluntarily as a customer service sometimes, too, as long as the costs don't become prohibitive. But we have concerns about the drugs coming back into the pharmacy because, unfortunately, just like those guns, the patient can get paid to get those drugs back, too. And then they get redispensed. If you go into an illegal or a pharmacy that's looking for making money on drugs, they will literally go into the bins and take them back. They will recycle the drugs that they get into the program or from skilled nursing facilities. So that's part of our concern with the drugs coming back into a pharmacy. We don't want that temptation to be there.
And in L.A. County, the sheriff actually, what he did for a while, I don't know if they've pulled them off, but they took old mailboxes and they painted them white, and they used them as where you could drop the drugs off. You can't get necessarily into it. But when we tried to do this in Long Beach, our chief of police just absolutely refused. He said that, his officers have to be on site and actually physically take custody when they bring it. And by the way, we don't do gun buyback programs in Long Beach because often what will happen in crimes, just a little bit of trivia, is that that's where they bring the guns that have committed a crime. And so then you have difficulty tracing that gun to the criminal. So they do not buy back guns in Long Beach for that reason.
Good to know, but let me ask you a question. You just said something, April 27th is a drug take-back day. Where?
Everywhere. If you go onto our website, we'll have a link where you can go, you put in your zip code, and it'll give you locations near you. It's all run through the DEA.
Right.
So if you go to www.dea.gov, which is
Okay.
the federal entity, you should be able to find a link that way.
So let me suggest that's nice, but it's useless. Okay? That anybody that wants to do this, you have got to make it accessible and convenient. Accessible and convenient doesn't mean that Barbara has to remember to go to www.da.gov. So my recommendation is that we now have something we can put out there as a blast. We can put it out there as a blast by the medical board. We can put it out there by the pharmacy board. We can ask that every other board that oversees prescribing put it out there. And we can ask elected officials to put it in their newsletters. These newsletters go to their constituents. People read them. At least some people do read them. We can ask local media to put it in there. I mean, this is something we have something tangible. Let's use it. Let's not miss an opportunity, so to say.
We have 3 weeks. Yep. I think it's
Well,
already up on
good.
ours. But you're right. I think that's a good opportunity, and especially getting the elected officials involved. It's a
But
good
I'm going to
thing.
suggest to you, up
Good
on your
constituents.
website's not good enough. An email blast to
Nope.
your constituents to say to their customers when they walk in the pharmacy, do you know that you can bring back your drugs to this pharmacy on April 27th? There's not a big deal.
No questions asked.
Yeah, but most places, they're not pharmacies that the DEA allows them to come back to, quite honestly. They're bringing them back to hospitals. They're bringing them back with law
Oh, well,
enforcement.
that's not what I just heard. I heard all.
Yeah, they're
Didn't I
not-
just hear
they're-
everybody's doing it?
Not all
No.
pharmacy.
There's locations where they agree to do it because there's you've got the DEA there. Not everybody's set up to do it.
Right.
A lot of them are pharmacies. A lot of them are
Okay, so
community
how about
events.
this? How about this? You guys have nothing to do for 3 weeks, I'm sure. So for 3 weeks, can you come up with by county where it's available? Can you blast it to the county, state office holders and local office holders and ask them to publicize? I mean, can we do something with this information? I don't understand. We've got 3 weeks. We have something that's really could make an impact and make a difference. Can we ask the Department of Consumer Affairs? Can we ask the governor's office? Can we take a look at making this, if this isn't important? I mean, I'm hearing that it is very important, take back stuff. If it's not very important, then forget it. But I'm just suggesting that we need to have something when we have an opportunity like this. I'd like to know where it is because guess what? I will bring all those 40 Vicodin bottles back somewhere with pleasure. That's not the point. That's the point. I have lots of teeth. They've come out.
And some communities actually do a very good job publicizing it. I know in the community in which I live, every pharmacy, because they're under the gun all the time, has signs that says, go there, go somewhere else on April 27th already. CVS has done this for a long time.
I haven't seen anything, so I'm just saying.
It's a community-specific
But
thing.
part of it's a repetitive message too. You want to try to get the first time you try to educate people, it's not going to
Nobody
usually
hears you,
hit.
right.
And you've got to just kind of repeatedly throw it out there.
Okay, thank you. Any last minute, thank you. I mean, it was, good. Thank you very much. It was really most successful. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item number 5 and ask Ms. Simoes to come up and discuss
You okay?
interested parties work group, please.
Good morning. SB 380 Right was signed into law in 2011 and was sponsored by the California Academy of Preventive Medicine. This bill requires the Medical Board of California to convene a working group of interested parties to discuss nutrition and lifestyle behavior for the prevention and treatment of chronic disease at a quarterly board meeting within 3 years of the effective date of the bill. This bill also requires the board to periodically disseminate information and educational material regarding the prevention and treatment of chronic disease by the application of changes in nutrition and lifestyle behavior to each licensed physician and surgeon and to each general acute care hospital in California. Board staff has had discussions with the author's office of this and the sponsors of this bill on the mandate to hold a working group meeting, and we believe it would be best to hold this meeting in Sacramento. Board staff thinks it would be appropriate to hold the working group as part of the Education and Wellness Committee. Additionally, staff believes a working group meeting could be held via this committee in conjunction with the board meeting in Sacramento on July 18, 2013. This committee may wish to appoint some of the members of this committee to participate in the working group. Board staff will continue to work with the author's office, the sponsors, and other interested parties, as well as this committee, in the planning of and the agenda for the working group meeting as required by this bill. That concludes my presentation.
So you're looking for volunteers for this working group?
Because it's a working group, it would require participation from the sponsors. Have actually sent a letter to the California Academy of Preventive Medicine and has suggested 7 names to participate in this working group. And I will also be working with the author's office to see if they have any additional names. Because it's a working group, these people would actually have to, wouldn't be a public comment type setup. It would be a working group. And so, if the committee wishes, they may want to appoint a couple members to participate in this working group.
So let me ask you a question. I'm not looking to, before we ask for volunteers, I'm looking to suggest that there are people that are doing this already anyway, that maybe a call for best practices from entities that are already doing this anyway might be an idea, so that I would ask that at least that people from managed healthcare groups, American Diabetes Association, those people be invited to participate in this work group. I'm just concerned that
I think the California Academy of Preventive Medicine does have some best practices that they want to participate in this working group. But then the second part after the working group of what we come up as educational items could be distributed is a requirement that we disseminate that information to all physicians and general acute care hospitals. So after that work group, our plan would be to take that information that we got in the working group, and we would basically get it out to physicians via the newsletter, or and then we would work with Department of Public Health to get it out to hospitals via their all facility letters.
Dr. Levine?
So I have a question about a process question. So you're suggesting that this occur in lieu of the Education and Wellness Committee?
Well, as part of, so, we could have some items as, that are just Education and Wellness Committee items, but then, start the working group portion of that.
But that would then involve all the members of this committee?
I would suggest the opposite. I would suggest that the work group should report back to this committee, maybe, versus this committee here, or facilitate a meeting of the work group. But I could be.
Okay, so, well, my response to that would be, because the way the bill is written, it says it has to be part of the board meeting. And so we've even gotten criticism for making it part of the education committee. We were thinking of doing it in the committee format might make more sense than actually doing it at a full board meeting. But the way the bill's worded, it has to be
So we could do the working group as part of the board meeting, prior to the board meeting, like the day before.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Wednesday before.
Right, exactly.
So as part of the committee meeting, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
So Dr. Salmonson, did you want
So
to?
can I,
I guess you'd hope with that. I just wondered if you could reiterate.
Your microphone, please.
If you could tell again the requirements of the bill,
Okay,
just so
sure.
we could better maybe.
Okay. So the bill actually requires the board to convene a working group of interested parties to discuss nutrition and lifestyle behavior for the prevention and treatment of chronic disease at a quarterly board meeting within 3 years of the effective date of the bill. Although we still have some time, we're getting a lot of pressure from the author's office and the sponsors as to when we're going to hold this work group meeting. So,
Dr. Levine?
second part of my question
I
was,
apologize.
no, that's okay. The interested parties are more than the California Academy of Preventive Medicine. So I'm assuming
I
there'll
was
be
suggesting what
outreach.
I was suggesting.
California Academy of Family Practice needs to be included. The Prevention Institute should be invited. There are tremendous, unlike, quite honestly, there's an awful lot of work going on.
See, that's why I had suggested like the American Diabetes Association. I had suggested the managed healthcare. And we've had, if we're getting dinged on this, we did have a meeting where a young man came and did a very wonderful, in my opinion, presentation in front of the full board, of which I have sent his name and CV on to other entities, because that's how impressed I was. And I'm sure other people that watched it or were present at the meeting heard his presentation as well, that there is work going on. So unless Mr. Wright is looking to hold this meeting in his office, which I don't think he is, I think that to broaden the opportunity, And to do it right is a bit more professional than to just do it because we've been told to do it.
No, I definitely plan from now until then to contact the author's office, but also other interested parties. So, I've wrote the names down that Sharon's given me, or Dr. Levine's given me. But if there's any other names, please feel free to email them to me, and I'll do outreach.
The professional boards that deal with this, the board, the pediatric boards. I mean,
American Academy.
American Academy. Yeah. I mean, there's, as well as the schools. It might be interesting to hear what if the schools are working in conjunction with nursing programs. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Public schools, Ask Mr.
definitely plan-
Turlexon's office to show up too.
The purpose of this update was just kind of let you know this is coming, and to make sure everyone was okay with the strategy. And then we have some time between now and July to contact all the other interested parties.
I mean, clinic associations maybe too. And we can have everybody show up.
We will do our best to include all the interested parties.
And then make sure they stay. Okay, so you're not really going to take volunteers now, right? You don't really need them.
If we do it as part of the whole thing, then we don't really need.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to item number 6 and ask Ms. Hawkinson and Ms. Simoes to please come forward. And Ms. Simoes, would you please introduce Ms. Hawkinson as well to the committee?
The board recently hired a new public information officer too, and her name is Cassandra Hawkinson. She's only been here for a couple weeks, and we were very glad to have her.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to meet all of you. I'm happy to be here. I want to start with our public affairs strategic plan, and I want to bring something forth that I think is absolutely key to all of it, and that is that we need to engage social media, but we need to be smart about it. And I feel that what we should do is start Twitter. Twitter is very manageable, and I will, of course, be developing a presentation to the committee on how it'll work and its time commitment. But I can tell you that it's the way of the future, and you can get information out, and you don't have to worry about things being posted and people commenting like you do on Facebook. I don't think Facebook is appropriate for the medical board, but Twitter, absolutely. It can easily be used and controlled. You can obtain what's called an official status, which means that Twitter will label our tweets as definitely from the Medical Board of California, so that when people receive them, they know they're from us. You can direct followers to our website. You can disseminate information with regards to our newsletter, regulations. I mean, there's so much immediacy at this. These, limited characters can get a lot of information out really quickly, and you can build following. And I think that it provides, like I said, immediate contact and outreach. You can alert to information. It's just, it's a plethora of things that it can accomplish for us.
So let me ask you a question. Within that development of a plan, could you also survey your supposed audience as to how effective they feel this would be, as well as how much would they use, or do they use it currently?
Well, it's right now I can tell you absolutely that it is the media's Bible.
I'm not asking about the media's Bible because they're not my constituency. I'm asking about our physicians, our licensees, as well as our consumers.
Yes, forgive me, but let me explain further. This is the way a lot of agencies reach their stakeholders and their constituencies and consumers. In order to start with Twitter, you would need to start building up your situation, building up your followers. And we can interlink that with, certainly we could do a survey to see if that would be something that people would like through SurveyMonkey. But in addition, keep in mind that, if you talk about this coming up and you mention this on the website, that, you now have a Twitter account and you have the little icon there, people will see that and they'll start following, because people realize that it is immediate and they realize that that's information that's coming across at current time. Yes?
Would you be targeting the general public, or would you be targeting physicians, and would you have two sort of messages that one would go to one group of followers, and I guess they could cross, but...
They would cross. I mean, I don't see any reason why what you would Twitter wouldn't apply to both. I mean, if you're twittering a new law and a regulation, the consumer's going to be interested in that as well as a physician. I mean, I see no distinction there, quite honestly. You know, you're sharing information, you're educating not only the physicians and the students, but you're also educating the consumer as to what's going on and what we're doing, and the fact that we have a new article up on pain management on our website. Here's our link. Go to our website. I mean, we can direct people to our newsletters, to our websites. I mean, we can utilize this in, like I said, a plethora of manner. So many different ways we can use it. And it's not difficult to maintain. It doesn't require hours of time. You know, what you want to do is maybe you could easily Twitter a couple of messages a day. You could have a couple people that have access to the Twitter account that can do the tweets. They can be approved. You know, they can go through exec staff for approval before they go out. I mean, I really, really strongly feel that it's a key to what we want to do and what we want to accomplish.
Could we first maybe focus on fixing our website before we start directing people to it?
I agree, and I'm going to get to that as well.
Because I brought this up before. I teach healthcare administration. I have my students look at the website each semester, and
yes,
they don't find it consumer friendly.
No, I don't either.
And it's not friendly for a diverse population.
Agree.
It looks like it was set up by staff and without the stakeholders that use it. So I would hope before we start directing people over to a website that we could make it a little bit more informative and easier to follow.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I'm going to address that. That's part of my plan. So I'm going in order. So kind of bear with me just a moment. Right now we're talking about the professional education outreach, which is where I'm starting with this. And like I said, a lot of, as we go through these 9 different items, social media is going to be on every one of them. So it's just the outlay of this. And so I wanted to bring this up front right away to let you know that I feel that is a big key. Let's move to education outreach with regards to educating our students and graduates. I feel like the teams of 2, reestablish that speaking bureau, 1 staff person and a board member to talk to professional meetings. I think it's a great idea. I think you can take that concept a step further regarding professional education by filming those and putting them on the web. You can also do webinars for this. I know that travel sometimes is an issue. Webinars can reach a large number of people, and there's different people that set webinars up. It's easy. I know we do webinars with our board meetings. That's a way to reach a large audience in addition. I think personal appearances by our educators can be videotaped, like I said, for YouTube distribution as well. These educational meetings that we have, whether we're addressing the problem with prescription drug use or whatever it is, we can film that. We can put that on our website, and we can put that on YouTube both. It can go both places. We can even do a video on specific education topics, like I mentioned. You know, we can inform on licenses of various regulations, requirements, latest trends, you know, anything that we would like to focus on. We can set that up, we can film it, and we can put it out there. But I also think the actual physical appearance and public speaking is important as well. But this does open us up to reaching a much larger audience. Website. I propose we need some help with the website, most definitely. I agree with you completely. We had a survey done on SurveyMonkey as well and got some feedback already. But some of the things that I'm proposing for that, for education, and again, like I said, a lot of these are going to cross over for a lot of these other topics, is I proposed a segment that we do called a Story of the Week about an issue of interest to licensees along with a photo on the main page. And what we would do is we call a splash page. You call them a blast splash page, where you have something on the web page and you talk about it And then as you click the link, you go into more detail on it and links, further links with further information, further education. I find those work very well. They're well received. I utilized them at the Air Resources Board and found that they were very successful. It's a very easy concept, and it kind of brightens up your web page. You can do a different story. You can do a couple of them a week. You know, you can change that and get that moving and not be stagnant. I also feel like we can create a need to know or a be alert section on the main page that articulates current problem areas and enforcement or compliance, along with solutions for physicians and medical students. Kind of here's a current problem you need to be aware of. You know, we could even put a link for additional solution. You can go to this link, or we can, again, you know, give a solution, have them go into a deeper storyline into our web page. But I think that having that be alert section and having it labeled and set apart, I think is a really good idea to draw attention. 80% of the people that go to our website read our main page, and they read our main page. So I think that, you know, these are quick, easy things we can get up there on our main page to make it more viable and more interesting. Also, as I talked about earlier about the videos, you know, I'm going ahead and putting videos on our page and providing links to those videos. Certainly, you can have a library of the videos. You can, you know, archive them as they get older and keep them in a separate spot. But I think that videos on your page are important. You know, I think that you can certainly do that as well. We're going to move on to outreach and education with regards to the public. Again, the social media that I spoke about. But like I said, I will provide a more detailed presentation on this with regards to the work and the time commitment and that type of thing. Again, YouTube we talked about. Website. The website needs to be more intuitive. I completely agree. Web visitors are important, and basically, you know, web visitors have, again, answers that same question. You know, this is why we matter. And this is what people are looking at. They want to know, you know, what are you going to do for me? Right off the bat. Right off the bat. And they don't want to have to search for what you're going to do for them. They want to see it right away. Educational outreach, again, we talked about the public speaking engagements. I recommend public speaking engagements at senior centers and facilities. This can be extended to a variety of organizations. We can speak to Lions Club, Kiwanis Club. We can speak at senior centers. We can have a wide variety of areas that we can speak from a consumer standpoint. In other words, you know, we can do outreach this way. And I did a lot of this when I worked at KCRA. I was the director of the Call 3 program, which is their consumer advocacy program, and I spoke to a lot of these centers, and people have luncheons, and they Teachers Association. I mean, I can go on and on. I've even spoke to the Assembly and the Senate about consumer advocacy. There's a lot of places that we can go with that educational outreach from a consumer level. When travel's restricted, again, we spoke about filming videos or webinars. I know we have travel restrictions, but here in our area, we're the capital, and a lot of people pay attention on what's going on here. And so consequently, you know, when we're doing events and doing things here, people do pay attention. I also think that we should conduct outreach at area events and fairs and cultural events. We can put out booths. I know this is something we did in the past. I think we need to bring it back. As a matter of fact, I've started that. We have been invited and are going to participate in the Franchise Tax Board's Wellness Fair on May 29th. And we will have a booth there. And that will be our first jump back into outreach. It's another state agency. It's nearby. It gets a lot of attention.
Also, the fact that there was, once the articles ran, there was no response from the board as a letter to the editor, and we've got to stop that, because the assumption, I have to tell you, in the community is we agreed with it. We didn't respond to it, and that must mean we agreed to it. And so two things came across in those articles. One was that I think they indicated they had attempted to get a contact and their call wasn't returned, and I don't remember the context on that. That's always a bad thing. But secondly, when those articles ran, they were let as is.
Right.
So I would hope, and I was going to bring this to the full board, I'm hoping that we can develop some kind of policy on this board about a rapid response, and that these articles do not be allowed just to sit, that there is some official response from the chair that indicates that where the inaccuracies are in the article, so the public has something to hear back from us.
Sure. May I draw your attention to 3.4? I agree with you. Of course, this is my third week with the board, so
Why haven't you fixed everything?
I'm working on it. I think we need to reach out to local media, but as we look here, technically, we need to define ourselves and our message. I completely agree with you. And we need to handle negative media, and it has three components. We need to stick with our message, we need to focus on the positive when possible, and we need to make them accountable. Track their stories and compliment them on good ones, and call them to task when they're misrepresented. And that indeed is exactly
But that
right.
doesn't mean
And
the PIO doing it. That means that there be an official response from this board when the board is attacked publicly.
I agree. You should have a letter to the editor.
Yes.
You should hold them accountable.
Yes,
If a
and
television station
quickly.
does, yes,
Quickly.
I'm agreeing. And so when I'm saying make them accountable, track their stories and compliment them on good ones, and call them to task when misrepresented. That's exactly what I mean, and I feel that very strongly.
Have we seen any good stories lately?
Um,
I haven't seen any good
it's
stories.
my third week.
Stock market's up. Stock market.
Are you,
no,
are you
I
talking
mean
about for us?
Us, not good news generally, Barbara.
The answer is no.
Well, and that's why I want to turn this around, and that's why I'm saying that, to reach out to the media and answer their questions and provide them what they need, and to stick to our messaging, establish our message, stick to the messaging, focus on the positive when possible, and make them accountable, build a relationship with them, then we can have that relationship, and we can pitch positive stories to them on the off time. When they're not like looking for problems, we can say, hey, we've got some really good stuff we're doing, and we'd like to pitch that.
I understand that, but I don't want to see another article in the LA Times about the board that goes unresponded to.
I agree. But like I said, it's my third week, so I'm working on it.
No, I know. And I know I'm appointed by the Senate Rules Committee, and I have to tell you that Senator Steinberg very concerned about what's been appearing in the LA Times.
I understand. And I really and actually, when I interviewed, my second interview, I talked about the fact that, in fact, I actually did my first interview. We talked about writing a letter to the editor, and that's something that should always happen. When you feel that there's a misrepresentation, they need to be held accountable. You need to point it out to them. You just don't let them.
Right, like little minor things, not referring to Dr. Levine as a physician in the article mentioning it at all.
Right.
I mean, that was a gross inaccuracy.
Actually, usually when we hear from the press right now, or when I'm hearing from the press right now, it's over a problem, like a doctor. There was a doctor arrested for DUI in Chico, and I talked to the Chico paper about that. He did a really nice article, and it was in the notes, and he did a nice job with the article, and I thought he represented what I said and what we do very well. And that would be an example of something that I thought, under the circumstances, was a pretty positive situation for us, the way we addressed it. I don't have a copy of it with me, but I know it was sent out in our notes, our news notes, the articles. It was in the articles, and it just came out, I think she put it in yesterday's or the day before.
They go out on Fridays.
Oh, we get them every day. You'll get them. Okay.
So let me suggest that in addition to, you've mentioned a couple of times there's issues with travel. I just would like to remind you, I'm sure you've been told this, but the board meets in other areas other than Sacramento.
Yes.
We're going to be meeting in April in Los Angeles.
Right.
We have a huge media community in Los Angeles.
Which is the genesis of the articles in the LA Times. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some proactive kind of work with the media
That means
before
meeting
we go
people.
out there.
Yeah, but it means also meeting with there's local media, there's ethnic media, and there's also the LA Times. But I'm just suggesting that use these opportunities when you're in other areas in the state. The computer works in between. I just don't want to
Sure.
see that we're going to take an opportunity to bypass Los Angeles again, and we're going to be there again, and there needs to be the opportunity to meet with people and to
Well, I'm sorry, but I won't be there at the end of April because I actually have a family issue, so I won't be at that board meeting. However, I also have some suggestions and some advice with regards to that. Yes.
Well, I just think a topic that I'd like to get input on how we can get this out, and that's how, now that the board has jurisdiction over accredited surgery centers, and get that information out there, because I think that the public is very confused. What's accredited? What is licensed? And,
How is it different?
And what's the difference? And, you know, we have been trying to get the message out, check on your physician, but now they have the opportunity to check on their surgery center. And there have been some improvements by having a direct button that I'd been asking for, not having to go through the alphabet system to find it, but it's still a little tricky. And I think so much goes on in surgery centers that we don't know about. And I think, again, I mean, I've got other concerns about the accrediting agencies, but that's a different talk. But at the very least, to say, hey, here's something, an opportunity for public protection, but please, public, take advantage of it.
Sure.
And I would think, I don't know if they're mandated. I think Barbara has said she has seen it in some surgery centers. If they are, just like physicians have to put up their, you know, we're regulated.
Right.
Does the surgery center? Because if they don't have to, I think they should, because that would be helpful. So if a patient sees something that doesn't seem right, they can report it to us, and not just to try to track down one of 4 accrediting agencies, which
I
could be
agree.
a good challenge.
I agree. Please, may I go back to your comments with regards to Southern California media? There's a couple things that that we need to do. One thing we're doing right away, and that is we need to develop what's called a listserv. It's a media listserv, and what it is it's a list of all news publications, all of them, that you can send newsletter to, news release to, and what I'm going to talk about in a moment, which is called a news advisory. We don't have this, and we're setting it up. Actually,
Wait, we don't have it?
for media, for current media contacts. In other words,
Well, you have the contacts, you might not have the person.
well,
You don't have it?
it's a listserv is set up so that you can send it out on an email blast
Right.
to media only.
We don't have that?
We have a listing on paper.
No, but you don't have a
we don't have a
listserv?
listserv, no.
I'm in the process of creating that, actually. I have my listserv from the Air Resources Board, so we're going to be adding to that. We're working on that as we speak.
So let me suggest, I'm glad you have it from Air Resources, but let me suggest to you that the Department of Consumer Affairs must have something like this for for the media. You would think that a state entity would have, and I would recommend that you might want to, this might be an opportunity to open the door and build a relationship with them anyway, or the governor's office. The governor's office has a media, a whole staff of people.
Well, actually, I am meeting with Russ Heinrich
Good,
next week.
good.
But yeah, I mean,
Please.
hang on a second. The listserv needs to be done, and I want to look a listserv. I mean, stations and media are stations and media. Okay, CBS2 is CBS2, no matter who has it on their listserv. I'm going to go through. And get all of these on. Plus, as we build reputations and relationships with different reporters, we can add them to our listserv. In addition, I feel strongly that we should add national publications like the New York Times and places like that, because they are also.
I'm sorry, can we back up? We've got
Sure.
a big problem coming in April. We just, again, were blasted in the LA Times. We are going to LA. We know Mike Helsick will be there. We know some of the people who blasted on the Sunset thing will be there. And we need to do something proactively.
See, and
because
that's,
they will
by
be-
the way, Michael Hilsick is the guy that wrote the articles
Right.
on the lap band. He happens
Okay.
to write in the business section, not a health writer.
Okay.
And it would be very good to invite him since we're going to be doing that subject anyway, as a proactive, come and see what we're doing.
Okay.
And that's a very good idea.
I would
Jerry.
need a direct contact for him, and I can add him on. But in addressing your concern, and I know I'm not going to be there in April, but I have a solution and I have a suggestion for all of our future information. And that is that we start doing what are called news advisories.
I know. Well, wait a minute. Come on. Is
But-
there other staff that can be there? Because this is not
Yes.
just.
Yes, there will be other staff. But I mean, I want to explain to you, you want to reach out to media, you want to get them to come to things, okay? Your news, your news releases are informational. A news advisory is not. A news advisory is to attract media to an event. This is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, this is why we're doing, this is what you're going to find out.
What, when, where, and why.
Exactly.
We're kind of familiar with what you're talking about.
Right,
all the time.
but they're not sent out by this agency, and they should be. And so in sending out news advisories to the media, when we have board meetings, when we have events and stuff that we would like to draw them to and attract them to, they're easy, they're short, they're sweet, and we get them out on the listserv. And not only that, but if there's a specific situation where we want media to come after we send out a news advisory, like let's say we're having some sort of an outreach event, we can also contact their assignment desks.
Right.
Personally
we know the
and get them
logistics.
out.
The problem is we know they're going to come.
Right.
So it would be very helpful if either you or the executive director can prepare some talking points, because the board members, I can guarantee you, are going to be asked, because this issue is still very hot, particularly about overprescribing, and drug seeking and the whole
Right.
issue about cures. So they're going to expect that somehow we've had some updates about what's going on, because they will be there and will probably want to know that information.
No problem with talking points. I mean, I agree. You should have them, and we should be able to address it. But in the news advisory, when you send that out as well, you also have who they could contact for further questions and information. And I plan on watching the meeting here on the web and having my name and number for additional contact information if people have specific questions, so that I'll be up to speed on what's happening and how we can respond and what our messaging is going to be. So I'm not going to be available. I'm not going to be able to travel because of a family issue on that particular meeting, and I apologize. It's not the norm for me. But I do plan on doing a news advisory. I'm in the process of, like I said, building up that listserv to get that out, to get the news advisory out, so we can notify people before the board meeting so that they know this is the board meeting's coming up, this is where it's going to be. If you have additional questions about anything, that you can contact me, and I'll probably have Jennifer on it as well as a backup. But yes, we will have that, and yes, I will be available for questions and contact. And yes, I think you should also have talking points. I need to know what the concerns are, obviously, because I'm new with regards to your talking points. I'm learning that today at this meeting, a lot of it.
You might want to get the media clippings of the past year.
Yes.
Board articles on the board, and those are the things we're concerned about, because those are the things we're going to be asked about.
Okay. And that's something I can certainly do, and we can prepare talking points for it. Now, in your public my understanding, though, is that we're going to be addressing pretty much what's on the agenda that people can actually comment on and ask about, but not public comment items. That gives them you an opportunity to hear what the problems are and then address them later. Am I not correct on that?
Right.
There's no cross-discussion public comment.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so
you have your work cut out in front of you, but you need to hear from this committee, and you will hear from the board, its frustration
yeah, absolutely.
of the lack of engagement, of outreach and communications to underserved communities, as well as to the general population in communities. So know that you've got your work cut out for you. So we're going to look forward to hearing positive messaging that you've gotten all this together, because it's a big deal. I mean, I'm surprised to know that this is not in place, and there are resources. You don't have to be sitting there figuring it out all by yourself. I'm suggesting that there
I understand.
are. Okay, I'm glad, but I'm concerned.
Okay.
Well, it may
Dr.
be
Salmonson.
water under the bridge, but a tangible example was during time of furlough, and people didn't understand that we're not funded by tax dollars. And the interpretation in a particular article was the doctors are too cheap to spend enough for their license to have proper enforcement, when in fact we had a surplus, the money was taken from our fund, and we were mandated to have furloughs anyway. That explanation was subsequently provided by the CMA because the board apparently didn't feel it was appropriate to respond. And fortunately, CMA did, but that was a very wrong piece of information, very not even opinion, it was factually false. And we kind of let CMA take the ball, and believe me, I'm not defending them, but in that instance, they did accurately answer that. But that's just an example of how we do feel we're kind of under the need to not respond as individual board members, but we're hoping for a board response on that kind of factual error.
So let me ask you a question on this strategic plan. I'm noticing that the dates are more or less all the same. I think that's going to be a problem, and unless you expect to be able to get everything accomplished that you want to get accomplished, that's great. But I just want you to realize that we're aware that the dates are all the same.
Well, okay. I mean, actually,
They're either summer and fall, or they're spring
Winter.
and summer.
yeah.
Okay,
And the
so-
spring, because some of these,
So we're talking
already
about
started
from now till
working on.
December. So my
Right.
concern is that sooner than later, certain things are going to have to be accomplished. The issue of priority for P, what does P stand for?
P is priority. And if you look at status in some of these, the reason like with spring, summer, let's talk about media activity. I've already started to reach out to the CMA, the Attorney General's Office, the Franchise Tax Board, and of course, Department of Consumer Affairs. We do want to partner with them, not only in different, in press releases and information sharing and that type of thing. That's something that's I'm already working on, it's already happening.
Okay, so in addition to CMA, realize that there's a lot of professional organizations that represent
Absolutely.
doctors as well as, CMA is not the only, I mean, they spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money and a lot of energy.
Sure.
And they're very vocal, and they're very engaged.
Yes.
So not to short circuit them at all, but to consider that there are other opportunities for broader engagement.
Oh, absolutely. But we need to start somewhere, and those are good places to start. We've had an issue with a doctor locally in Rockland that Franchise Tax Board has also got an issue with, so partnering with them. Attorney General's Office, I'm meeting with their PIO next week. And CMA I already made contact with, and I hope to meet up with them. I'm sure there's other agencies, but to me, status is status, and that's a priority to me, is to start making these relationships. That's why it says spring and summer, because it's spring and I've already started. And with regards to clearly defining ourselves and our message, that's something we have to do right away. So that's why that has the same date. Exercising reasonable transparency, that's something we have to do right away. That's why that's got that date as well. So please keep in mind when you're looking at this and you're looking at my status, that it's indicating to you that things have started.
Well, no, I can appreciate that. I just want you to know
Okay.
that we're all concerned. We're waiting
I
for you.
understand.
You're here. We're happy you're here. We're looking forward to your success. Let me suggest to you that what I'm hearing from you is that you're going to be very proactive, which I can very much
Yes,
appreciate. For me,
correct.
that's very important. So I'd venture to say that it's also an issue in the ethnic communities to be proactive and not to wait to hear back from them to
Absolutely.
determine your contacts.
Absolutely. I actually have a very good friend who's the head of communications and public relations for CalAsia, so the CalAsian Chamber of Commerce. So I will be contacting Gordon, and I plan on reaching out, like I said, to him. And I spent a lot of my time putting this together thoughtfully and trying to, be as practical as possible and address all the problems that I see with the medical board. And quite honestly, from my perspective is what I used to do. You're right. Your reputation, you guys need help. And I'm here to help you. I'm here to make it
part of
better.
But, in fairness, this board went through a lot of hours putting a strategic plan together.
Right.
With the elements and prioritizing things that we felt were important, particularly on the educational outreach, the outreach, the information. So we're acutely aware of the need
Sure.
to improve the image. And actually, if we go back 3.4, one of the things, if you're looking to add things on this, when you get to the handling negative media, if you could add the fourth point, and that would be that the response needs to be done rapidly and timely.
Absolutely. No question about that. Absolutely. News is now. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. It's now. It's in the now, and you have to respond in the now. I completely agree with you. Yeah, that goes without saying. Like I said, I'm learning, a little bit more of some of the issues that you guys have dealt with certainly coming on board. And, you know, I realize that there's other things that I still need to learn, that I'm still discovering and learning about with regards to how things were handled in the past and processes and that type of thing. But we need to be more transparent. We need to determine our message. We need to outreach. We need to get out there. We need to respond. We need to not hide our heads in the sand, and we need to make them be accountable. Don't let them, you know, misrepresent us or say things that are inappropriate, whether it's the LA Times or the Chico Times or whatever it is. If they have false information, it should be brought to their attention. You should always bring it to their attention, no matter
So
who
let
it
me
is.
also recommend, because what I'm hearing is a possible shift in what has been the policy in the past. And if it is a shift in the policy, then it's a shift. I'm not suggesting there should be or there is, but what I'm hearing is that the opportunity for members of this board to be speaking on behalf of the board in a public situation, so that if that is going to be the shift, which
Well, I
I'm
think
not,
we put that in the strategic
okay,
report.
but if that's going to be if that's going to be the shift, then what has to also happen is that the messaging has to be united. You have got to do, and our executive director has got to do some training so that we are on message, so that we don't have a whole. Okay, I know what you said there. I just want you to hear what I'm saying.
I
There's a
understand.
reason.
I'm not sure where you got that I was going to have you guys talking to the media. I mean, you certainly, in certain circumstances, you know.
Okay, fine.
we
I
may,
thought I was hearing
but
that, so
no,
that's what I'm-
I will talk with the media, and I will, you know, represent the board with regards to the media and our messaging, but we all still need to have
We
our
need to be on the
messaging
same page. We all need to be
correct.
on the same page. That's
Yes,
all I'm
regardless
suggesting.
of whether you're being interviewed or not.
Right.
You
I
know,
just wanna
if
make
you
sure-
get cornered in the grocery store by, you know, a local reporter for some reason, and you feel, you know, you need to understand or realize, you know, what our messaging is and what the deal is.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that there's going to be a two-way street here. That's what I just
Oh,
wanna-
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
What might be helpful too is if you contact the Federation of Medical Boards and to talk with them about what they see medical boards are doing in terms of this kind of social media, because there's been some actually some concern put out there about using social media as it relates to physicians and others related to
I'm aware of
physicians.
it, and I've already looked at their information, and actually their concerns deal with more with you know,
Generations.
prescribing and things like that, and treating and that type of thing with
Well,
social
yes,
media,
you wouldn't
and
tweet a
negative
prescription.
comments
Right.
with regards to, you know, having a Facebook and having these things, which is not
Well,
Twitter.
you can retweet, and you can put negative comments
You
on an
can, but it
initial
isn't
tweet.
somewhere where you
can be
can go
removed as
and
well.
look. It's people who are following you that may see them, and usually people follow you for a reason.
Okay,
and-
again, I feel kind of resistance. We're trying to give you some feedback
I
because
understand.
we've worked extensively on the strategic plan. What I would hope that you would contact the
Yes.
Federation of Medical Boards,
Absolutely.
and then get back to us a sense of what are the other medical boards doing, because
Sure.
they are all facing kind of similar situations, both how to improve their outreach, their web, their social media.
I agree.
And things of that
But,
sort.
you know, again, I completely understand and I agree, but, you know, allow me to point out again that in the very beginning of this, I indicated that I'm going to need to develop a presentation for you on how this will work, the time commitment to use and maintain this. So that hasn't happened yet. But we're talking about it because I'm telling you it's important, but I'm not saying it's a done deal at this point in time. I still need to prepare this for you. I haven't done that yet, but I will.
We understand, but I'm just making a suggestion that they would be an excellent source.
I agree.
See the best practices for medical boards. Since we seem to be awry on what we've been doing, maybe we can find other boards that have done it better, and we might find a great model of how they've put it in place.
I agree with you completely, and that would be part and parcel of my preparation with regards to,
If I can put you in contact, it happens, I sit on the education committee for the FSMB. I'm happy to put you in touch with the person that would be responsible.
that would be wonderful if you could send me an email, that'd be great.
Dr. Levine?
Just a tactical question.
Sure.
No one expects that you're on call 24/7. Is there a plan for media contacts that occur outside of business hours? Is there a beeper that gets carried?
Yeah, I actually have a cell phone and with a number as well, and it's on my emails for contact as well, and it will be on my business cards, absolutely.
So what expectation are you creating amongst the world of media in terms of your availability? I mean, is that realistic?
You know, normally they don't contact you really off hours that often. I mean, usually they don't. I mean, but if it does happen and they're looking to get a hold of me, they'll be able to definitely be able to get a hold of
So
me.
you're saying it's not frequent enough to be an issue for you?
It's not frequent enough, no. I mean, it is if you're dealing with like something like, you know, CDCR where you've got riots in prisons at any point in time and that kind of thing. But in our situation, it's not going to be that frequent. However, if there is an emergency, then I will be reachable and I will be there to do my job.
And to the media, an emergency
Sure.
is their deadline.
Exactly, and most of them, like I said, you know, they're on by 4 a.m. and off by 11:30. So, you know, anything in between there, you don't hear from them. That's usually their time. That's not to say you wouldn't get a call at 6 in the morning, but no, that's fine. But oh, I'm sure they do. I mean, yes, they do. If there's an emergency, they will. And
No emergency, I just have a question. They should only call you for an emergency, it's good.
and that's pretty much, yeah. I mean, I was on that side of the table for over 10 years, so I understand.
Thank you.
Okay, anything more on this?
Not unless you have any other questions. We kind of jumped around, but I think we covered everything.
Mr. Hepler, I see an opportunity for you to say something.
Well, I just want to say I think I've set a new world's record in elapsed time for not commenting until now. But I just want to comment that since this mostly deals with public outreach and going out to the public, I just want to make sure that we don't have any public comment on the room about this subject.
I would be happy to call for public comment, but I've not seen any public comment cards, and if the public is interested in speaking, I'm interested in listening. But I don't have a public comment card, so there's nobody going to be commenting. But thank you for your reminder.
After looking at this, is there any other questions that
Any
the
other
board has
questions?
for me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been an engaging discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we have on the agenda any future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items that they would like to bring forward at this point? So we'll get back to staff. Might I recommend to the board, to the committee, that if there are issues that, you know, in a timely fashion, if you could get them, who's staffing this committee? Is this Cassandra, are you doing this, or Jennifer? Both of you together? United? United, okay, so please contact either one of them or both of them at the same time, and future agenda items would be fine. Thank you. So again, in no public comments, I don't see any public comments, and I'm going to ask for a motion to, excuse me? If there's any agenda items to become forthcoming that,
SB 380 at the next meeting?
SB 380, okay? Which is SB 380? Mr. Wrights?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have a little conversation about that with him. Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Well, before
Yes?
there were some follow-up items from the last committee meeting, the last Education and Wellness Committee meeting, which probably ought to be agendized for the next one. We were going to re-review the mission statements, and as I read through the agenda for the meeting today, I realized that there were some items that were scheduled to come back, and
You're correct, and we did that because now we're starting with a new PIO. We thought it'd be most important to go over her plan for implementing those, and then we could come back with that at the next meeting. So.
Okay, so motion to adjourn, please? So we're adjourned.
second.
I think you need a second, but thank you for that.
I'd like to ask if anyone who's got a cell phone to put it on stun or silent mode, and for those of us who have Blackberries, to keep them off the table as they tend to interfere with the AV equipment. Committee members may be accessing their laptops because the materials we're using today are we have on soft copy rather than necessarily doing their email. This is an official business meeting of the Medical Board of California, and we will conduct this in a disciplined fashion, and we'll hope to avoid any disruptions. We have a designated time on the agenda for public comment, and we'll ask for public comment on each agenda item. Please be respectful of the need to conduct the board's business, And I would ask that members of the public limit their comments to 3 minutes each so that we can get through our agenda. And as I said, we will have public comment on every item on the agenda. And if I forget somebody, please raise their hand. Kurt, my lawyer here, keeping me honest. And if it helps us if anyone wants to speak to fill out a slip, Lisa will collect the slips, Ms. Toof. And if you haven't and would like to speak on an agenda item, just raise your hand and I recognize you. But we'll ask that you fill out a slip after the fact. And I will do my best to call on everyone who has a desire to speak. Ms. Toof, could you call the roll?
Ms. Shipsky? Dr. Diego? Here. Dr. Solomsman?
Here.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Here.
Dr. Lowe? And Dr. Levine?
Here.
Thank you.
We do have a quorum, and so we can proceed. I don't have any slips in hand. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an agenda item, on an item that is not on our agenda for this afternoon? Seeing no hands, I think then we can proceed with the agenda. We will move to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes from the September 19th, 2012 committee meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Any changes that board members have seen? Seeing none, is there a second? Can I get a second? Ms. Salmonson, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Moving on to item number 4, review of some of the 2013 legislation that impacts the practice of medicine and the Medical Board of California. Ms. Simoes is going to walk us through the bills, and she will indicate where we need to actually take a position and where the discussion is for information purposes. Thank you.
I just handed out an updated tracker list because where we're at in the process, things are changing every day. So on your tracker list, the bills in green we're going to be discussing at this committee hearing. The bills in yellow will be discussed at the full board meeting on April 25th and 26th. And the bills in blue are spot bills. If they are amended by April 22nd with language related to the board, they will also be discussed at the full board meeting. I do want to point out that the board's sunset bill, SB 304, has been introduced. However, it now only includes the extension of the sunset date. So if language gets amended before our board meeting, we will also be discussing that one. So let's start with the first bill. AB 154 Atkins is sponsored by Access Women's Health Justice, American Civil Liberties Union of California, Black Women for Wellness California, Latinas for Reproductive Justice, NARAL Pro-Choice California, and Planned Parenthood affiliates of California. This bill would eliminate the distinction in the existing law between surgical and non-surgical abortions and would allow physician assistants, nurse practitioners, and certified nurse midwives to perform an abortion by medication or aspiration techniques in the first trimester of pregnancy if specified training is completed and clinical competency is validated. This bill would essentially codify the Health Workforce Pilot Project, HWPP number 171, that was coordinated through the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development and sponsored by the Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health program at the University of California, San Francisco. The purpose of the pilot project was to evaluate the safety, effectiveness, and acceptability of NPs, NMs, and PAs in providing aspiration abortions, and to evaluate the implementation of a standardized competency-based curriculum and provision of aspiration abortion care. As part of the pilot, 40 nurse practitioners, certified nurse midwives, and physician assistants were trained to be competent in aspiration abortion care. Clinicians participated in a comprehensive didactic and supervised clinical training program, which included a written exam and competency-based evaluation process. Trainee competency was evaluated daily, and at the end of the training on competence, procedural performance, patient care, communication, interpersonal skills, professionalism, practice-based learning, and clinical knowledge. This bill would require PAs, NPs, and CNMs to complete specified training and achieve clinical competency, which was also required as a part of the pilot project, before they are allowed to perform abortions by medication or aspiration techniques. The sponsors believe that increasing the number of providers for aspiration abortions will increase the ability of women to receive safe reproductive health care from providers in their community. Staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board take a neutral position on this bill, but I would need a motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll do a second for purposes of discussion.
Okay. All right. So let's discuss the bill before we vote on it. Ms. Yaroslavsky? Oh,
So I would like to know why staff feels that a neutral position is, versus a support position is appropriate.
I think support is another way we could go. I just was not sure if the board would be supportive of this measure.
The reason I'm asking the question specifically is that this board was well aware of the pilot project going on, observed the pilot project numerous occasions. As far as I know, there was no issues as to the appropriateness of the educational opportunities that were afforded, the oversight and supervision by a on-site appropriate person. I'm trying to remember the title, if it was a not only the medical director, but also a provider of services. So I'm not sure why. I mean,
I think we could go either way. I think we could go neutral, and but we could be supportive of the measure too.
okay.
I just want to point out, not on the merits, just technicality with that none of, I apologize, this microphone thing. None of these license groups are in fact de facto medical board licensees, correct?
Correct.
If I may, the board usually takes a cautious approach when we look at the expansion of scope of practice, and so staff felt that going with a suggested neutral position, especially because the full board hasn't been able to discuss this and review it in this format, might be the more appropriate way for the executive committee to go, although certainly at the full board meeting, you can discuss the reasons why you would want to support it.
Okay.
But you certainly can go with a different position.
So what we will be doing is recommending a position to the full board, and it will be open for full discussion at the full board. We have a motion on the floor to support a neutral position on the bill at this time, and we have a motion and a second. Can I ask all in favor?
No.
Oh, no? Oh, public
comments.
comment, sorry, on this bill.
Do you have any slips?
I do, but it just says agenda item 4, so I'm not, if it's not related to this bill, we can wait.
Saw someone was starting to get upset.
Oh. Okay. Yes.
I'm Margaret Crosby with the American Civil Liberties Union, and this is Deborah Rottenberg from Planned Parenthood, and we are the co-sponsors, but we are just available to answer any questions if there are questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your offer. All right. Then all in favor of a neutral position at this time and referring to the board for fuller discussion?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay.
Okay, great. Moving on, the next bill is AB 635, Amiano, and this bill is sponsored by the Harm Reduction Coalition and the California Society of Addiction Medicine. This bill would amend the Civil Code to allow a licensed healthcare provider that is authorized by law to prescribe an opioid antagonist to prescribe and subsequently dispense or distribute an opioid antagonist to a person at risk of an opioid-related overdose, or a family member, friend, or other person in a position to assist a person at risk of an opioid-related overdose. This bill would allow the licensed healthcare provider to issue standing orders for the administration of the opioid antagonist. This bill would specify that if a healthcare provider or person who possesses, distributes, or administers an opioid antagonist pursuant to a prescription or order acts with reasonable care, they shall not be subject to professional review, be found liable in a civil action, or be subject to criminal prosecution for issuing a prescription or ordering or possessing, distributing, or administering the opioid antagonist. Naloxone is used in opioid overdoses to counteract life-threatening depression of the central nervous system and respiratory system, allowing an overdosing person to breathe normally. Naloxone is a non-scheduled, inexpensive prescription medication with the same level of regulation as ibuprofen. Naloxone only works if a person has opioids in their system and has no effect if opioids are absent. Existing law established a 3-year overdose prevention pilot project in 2008. The pilot granted immunity from civil and criminal penalties to licensed healthcare providers in 7 counties who worked with opioid overdose prevention and treatment training programs if the provider acted with reasonable care when prescribing, dispensing, or distributing naloxone. The pilot was extended in 2010 and extended liability protection of third-party administrators of naloxone. The pilot is now scheduled to sunset on January 1st, 2016. According to the most recent data released by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in 2008, there were 36,450 drug overdose deaths in the United States. According to CDC, overdose prevention programs in the United States distributing naloxone have trained over 50,000 laypersons to revive someone during an overdose, resulting in over 10,000 overdose reversals using naloxone. Of note, language in existing law for the pilot project only includes civil and criminal liability. It does not exclude healthcare providers from professional review. Board staff is unsure of what the reasoning behind including professional review is, but would like to continue to work with the author's office on this point and bring this bill back to the board at the April board meeting. However, this bill will help to further the board's mission of consumer protection. So staff at this time is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board support this bill in concept, but have staff continue to work with the author's office.
Can I ask a technical question? Is that different than support if amended?
It is a little bit different because I don't know, I haven't had a chance to actually meet with, I don't know what the meaning behind is professional review. Are they talking about our review? Are they talking about peer review? If we actually ask for that amendment, we should have be clear on what the reasoning was behind that. So that's why we went with a support and concept. I mean, I think we could go with a support if amended if it was sure and it's an amendment that we would want to take.
Okay.
I just haven't had a chance to have that meeting yet.
Ms. Salmon, Dr. Salmonson?
Yeah, I just, with that professional review in there, I'm not quite clear what protection the healthcare providers are getting. I mean, it's already not criminal to prescribe it, is it? I mean, what is this?
Well, part of
what
it has-
added protection is this law giving if the professional review part is still in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the professional review part. Like I said, I want to look into that a little bit further. But what it's allowing them to give a standing order, not just to the person, but also to the family or a friend, or it's other than just your patient, and that's part of the reasoning behind.
That's what the difference
because
is.
the
Okay.
reasoning kind of behind it has been in talking. I did meet with the author's office once, but I haven't met with them again. Is that if you're the patient and you're undergoing a drug, overdose, that you are in a position to give yourself this drug. So, and this is the reasoning behind giving it to other people.
But would the drug be given, the name on the prescription would be to the person who was presumably at risk to overdose, but
Yeah.
then it would be administered by the
Yeah,
family
and
member.
it may be given to that, distributed to that other person and administered also. So the patient would give it to their family friend, whoever's in that position, and that person would be administering it to the patient.
So somehow this is perhaps different than what's still going on. I'm unclear on how this is different, but okay.
So do you want a motion?
Mr. Hepley, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just from a purely legal perspective, perhaps my colleague could chime in here too, Ms. Dobbs, but I'm not familiar with the term professional review. There is some inconsistency that if it were speaking strictly of the administrative discipline system, then we would say exempt, you'd be exempt from discipline. Professional review sort of could be somewhat vague in that, is it peer review? Is it some other review that we're not aware of? So going forward, I would just, I think you mentioned, Ms. Mose, we probably want to clarify if that's, you're trying to insulate them from administrative action against the license or some other thing that we may not be readily aware of.
And peer review is a term of art, so it has a specific meaning,
So-
and professional review is very different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll have this cleared up, obviously, by our next board meeting. So.
Okay, so can I have a motion to support in concept the intent of the bill?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Oh, sorry, public comment on this bill? All right.
Okay.
Wait, all in favor? All opposed?
Good catch, Madam President.
Thank you.
Keep nudging me. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
The next
Miss-
bill is a similar topic. AB 831 Bloom is sponsored by the Drug Policy Alliance. And this bill would require the California Health and Human Services Agency to convene a temporary working group to develop a plan to reduce the rate of fatal drug overdoses in California. This bill would allow experts and staff from the Office of Emergency Services, State Department of Alcohol and Drug Programs, State Department of Public Health, Office of AIDS, and any other staff that the Secretary of CHHS designates may participate in the working group. This bill would also allow staff from the Medical Board of California and the Board of Pharmacy to participate for the purpose of identifying promising practices to reduce accidental drug overdose among patients and other at-risk groups. This bill would require the working group to make recommendations to the chair of the Senate Committee on Health and the chair of the Assembly Committee on Health on or before January 1st, 2015. This bill would sunset the working group on January 1st, 2016. This bill would appropriate $500,000 from the general fund for fiscal year 2014-15 and in later years, and would require the Health and Human Services Agency to make grants to local agencies from the $500,000 appropriation for specified purposes, including drug overdose prevention, recognition, and response education projects, drug overdose prevention, recognition, and response training for patients and their families, naloxone hydrochloride prescription or distribution projects, development and implementation of policies and projects to encourage people to call the 911 emergency response system when they witness potentially fatal drug overdoses, programs to educate Californians over 65 years of age about the risks associated with using opiate-based medications, the production and distribution of targeted or mass media materials on drug overdose prevention and response, education and training projects on drug overdose response and treatment for emergency services and law enforcement personnel, and parent, family, and survivor education and mutual support groups. This bill will help to protect consumers and potentially save lives in California, which will further the board's mission of consumer protection. Staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board take a support position on this bill. I need a motion.
So moved.
Any questions from members of the board? I was going to have a discussion, then a second.
No,
That?
you're no.
Second. Have a second? All right. Discussion by board members.
I think it's duplicative of what the board is trying to do with its forums and other work. And by the way, $500,000 for local programs for an entire state of California is kind of meaningless. And so I don't quite see the sense of doing it. I think this is a little, knee-jerk reaction to the press, but I do think we're on a path of trying to focus this in a way it needs to be done. So I wouldn't want to support it.
Well, I kind of was silent because I wondered why do I not have a good feeling about it, but I have to say, because you kind of want it, but I think you articulated the 500,000 and the it seems mean-spirited to not support it, but I don't think, it seems like where it's a duplication of effort in a way.
So I'll speak in support of the bill. And what I see in there is asking, independent of the medical board's efforts, this is placing within the California Health and Human Services Agency the responsibility of convening a work group to ensure that in addition to the medical board and pharmacy board and licensing board's efforts, that there actually is a broader community of people who are taking ownership of and engaging in efforts to see, for example, what the Office of Emergency Services might be able to contribute to this. So I don't see it necessarily as duplicative, though there may be overlap. Part of our job is to ensure there's no redundancy.
And I think it would allow us to participate, so maybe we could bring some of the things that we've learned to this working group.
That's what it's asking for specifically.
Yeah, so I think it would help maybe get that information out to other agencies, because state agencies don't always look at what other state agencies are doing, so maybe this is a good forum for that, but we leave that to the committee.
And to Ms. Shipsky's other comment, there's no guarantee that $500,000 will survive through the Appropriations Committee.
True.
There really are two separate sets of actions. One is the convening and trying to come up with a plan, and the other is a grant program, and that may fall by the wayside. So, Dr. Salmonson?
Well, now that you put it that way, another group, and I don't know, just schools. I mean, what the, I don't know, Department of Education, I don't know if they should be at the table, but
Absolutely. That's a really
If
good
they're not
suggestion.
named, I would think involve them.
And this, I suspect the secretary would be open to suggestions about other interested parties.
And it does kind of give an opening for the secretary to include other people that they, think might be beneficial to the working group. So.
Well, except the focus here on this bill is for people, for patients who are prescribed opiate-based medications, and for their families and communities. It doesn't go that broadly to talk about the whole issue of kids getting access to prescribed medication. It sounds as if it's similar to how do you stop people from overdosing, that have a legitimate prescription.
Well,
I would suggest that it seems to me that this is an educational opportunity, and that it doesn't look like it's going to solve the problem. We don't know what's going to solve the problem, but the more hands we put on deck, I think the better it is. I think it's important also, Mr. Bloom is a newly elected assembly person, and I think it pays for us to consider, he's trying. We should support it.
so I'll call members of the public. Okay, all in favor of a support position on AB 831, say aye. 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 I think I'm it. All opposed? So we have one for and one against. Oh, okay. 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 So you have a support position on the
Okay.
bill, Ms. Moses.
All right, the next bill is AB 916, Eggman. And this bill is sponsored by the California Society of Plastic Surgeons and would prohibit physicians from using the terms board, certified, or certification when advertising unless the terms are used in connection to a specific certifying board and that board has been approved by the American Board of Medical Specialties, is a board or association with equivalent requirements approved by the Medical Board of California, or is a board or association with an Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education approved postgraduate training program that provides complete training in that specialty or subspecialty. Of note, this bill does not address the proposal included the board sunset report that would remove the provision in existing law that requires the board to recognize equivalent boards or associations. Existing law prohibits physicians from advertising in public communications that they are board certified unless the board advertises a member of ABMS approved by the medical board or association within the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education approved postgraduate training program. According to the author's office, there are some physicians misrepresenting themselves and their qualifications by providing misleading statements in public communications. Physicians can imply that they are board certified by using the terms board, certified, or certification in their advertising. When these terms are used, it circumvents the prohibition in existing law because they are not using the term board certified. This bill clarifies existing law to further protect the public and to ensure that patients better understand the training and qualifications of physicians from whom they are seeking care. So staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board take a support position on this bill, but I need a motion.
Do I have a motion?
Not going to support that.
Dr.
So moved.
Salmonson? And a
Could
second?
we not just do cleanup regulations, the existing law? Why couldn't we, maybe we'll ask legal counsel? Because since it's prohibited from saying you're board certified, the fact that they're game playing seems to me that the law's there. You just need to be very clear in the regulation that any combination of those two words would give the inference, but.
Respectfully, I understand your point, Ms. Shipsky. I think this cries out for a little bit more stronger stance of essentially putting it in statute. We do have some regulations that talk about false and misleading. I think this goes to the core issue, though, of what actual terms you can use, because 651 is very specific. It talks about board space certified, and as I think as Ms. Smose points out, it's board, couple words certified, or board, and in the next paragraph certified. I think the statute would need to be corrected for us to implement even a regulatory solution.
So to that comment, let me just ask the question. If the author is aware of this going on, are those people then reported to the medical board? Medical board is taking a look at it as a complaint and then is taking a look at the truth in advertising portion of what's already in place and then disciplining that license, or we're not doing anything?
Well, okay.
not working in enforcement, but it's my understanding that this is, you can file a complaint with the medical board, and I think if there's an advertising violation, I believe it's dealt with cite and fine. However, Ms. Kirkmeyer, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe false advertising is identified in the statutory list of priorities.
It's not.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Ms. Simos, the term, there are some subspecialty sections which have certification process. Some of them go on to be actually boards of the ABMS. Some of them issue a certification in, for example, a surgical procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Would this prohibit someone from representing that they are certified in laparoscopic cholecystectomies?
It would not allow them to use the term certified or certification unless it's an ABMS board or a board approved by us. So, yes, I think so. Mr. Hepler?
I would agree, although that's kind of a tough question to parse out. The way I see the bill working, you can't sort of roughly combine board certified, certified, or board unless it's one of the big three. You're actually approved or certified by that board, the ABMS board, a board that we have set as equivalent, or one of the ACGME boards. So I think to say you're board certified in a procedure.
No, not board certified.
Okay.
That you are certified, because these training programs, they're shorter than a residency. They're often a fellowship program, and they provide certification in an interventional procedure. It's a certificate program as opposed to a board, which has. It tends to be more narrow than so. For example, a general surgeon may have done a 1-year fellowship in laparoscopic nephrectomy of the left kidney. And they have a certificate, they've had advanced training in that. So it's a certification rather than a board.
I'm not sure, because that's not saying that it's like a member board. You're in this procedure.
I'm asking the question because it will come up,
Yeah,
that there are physicians who have gotten training and have a I think we just need to clarify with the author that a certificate in a procedural training from a advanced training program that is somewhat short of a board.
I would be not too thrilled about having that, in the sense that if anybody did that laparoscopic kidney thing, most likely they would already be certified by a board of general surgery. If they were not, then I wouldn't think that, it's usually, if it's the real deal, it's on top of already having.
Oh, I understand. And my question is.
And they shouldn't be giving an exemption.
It's not an exemption. Is this a prohibition on advertising in its broadest sense, that is putting it on their, where physicians advertise? Is it a prohibition on representing to the public that they have received training and certification, whether it's hypnosis? There's no American Board of Medical Hypnosis. But there are physicians who've gotten advanced training in hypnosis and have certification in hypnosis. Would they be prohibited from representing that advanced training?
It's a close call. I'm going to preliminarily, and again, I'm open to having a discussion, but I'm going to say no, because it looks like the thrust of this, if you look on 439, page 439 of the executive committee, it says, he or she limits her practice, but shall not include a statement that he or she is certified or eligible certification by a private or public board or parent association, unless it's 1, 2, or 3, and that's ABMS, one we recognize, or an ACGME, postgraduate that completes training in that specialty or subspecialty. So it's kind of going to be a fact-driven inquiry about what actually certification is held, and whether that actually goes to a specialty or a subspecialty. It sounds, again, I don't know my nephrectomy from my reflectectomy, But it seems to me that's more of a procedure-based thing, perhaps. Again, I don't have the knowledge to be sure, but it seems like my initial reaction was this seems to be aimed at the terms board certification. Your question, Dr. Levine, seems perhaps more guided in a certification as to a certain procedure, perhaps. That's a closer call for me. I could certainly offer up opinion by the next meeting, but
I think, too, if you look at the sponsor of the bill, this is issue that we've been grappling with people holding themselves out as being certified to do laser, certified to do some kind of cosmetic procedures, when in fact what this bill would do is require that you couldn't use those concepts unless you were board certified. And so that seems to be where they're going on this.
And I guess my only concern is that the language not inadvertently criminalize something that is otherwise not an objectionable activity.
perhaps what
So
legal.
I would suggest that, given Ms. Shipsky's calling our attention to who's sponsoring this bill, and there's been this friction with the plastic surgeons and the other kind of surgeons that do plastic work, that maybe we should take, and because of the concerns that Dr. Levine has shared, that maybe some kind of clarification should be a support if, with clarification or support if amended, because we're not supposed to be writing bills for one narrow focus of medical practice. We're supposed to be writing it for the general overarching. So my concern is if it's going to come out later that we're going to have another bill to clarify those people who have special, this is only for the plastic surgeons of the world? I don't know. Because what happens to the next doctor that...
No, and I have to say, we haven't even been really alerted by the plastic surgeon, so I'm not speaking at all because of plastic surgery, but really protecting, in my opinion, the value of ABMS, American Board of Medical Specialties. That's the concept that it's analogous to saying that we want to look at international medical schools and say, do they hold up to a standard? And that is the concept that we want to say, do boards hold up to a standard? Is it just a club that you can buy a membership in, or is it a testing organization, namely the American Board? It's ophthalmology, it's dermatology, it's definitely not a plastic surgery issue. That may have been the area where the boundary issues are the most egregious, because things can happen in surgery centers that are not, and we can talk about that later, but in the past, the gatekeeper for this kind of thing has been hospitals. And
Right. My point was just as a clarifying motion, or clarifying to the motion, that the object being that what you said before, that these would be specialty procedural certificates taken on top of a board certification anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So to ensure that that's what the meaning of this bill is, I'm just recommending that there should be
Perfect.
some kind of clarification
Agree with that.
from the author in order to support it. And I would appreciate then I would be willing to change. I don't know that I was the maker of the motion, so
And
I
I'm
can't
not,
make-
we have a motion to support the bill, and I think we can ask Ms. Simoes to get clarification.
Now I can get
Okay, as long as
clarification,
that's fine.
so
Okay,
yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
as long as
Yeah.
that's fine.
So, all in favor of supporting the bill? Oh, sorry, public comment on this issue? All in favor of supporting the bill?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, and thank you very much for putting up with that.
Okay, the next bill, AB 1000 Wachowski, is sponsored by the California Physical Therapy Association. And this bill would allow a physical therapist to make a physical therapy diagnosis, which is defined as a systemic examination process that culminates in assigning a diagnostic label identifying the primary dysfunction toward which physical therapy treatment will be directed, but shall not include a medical diagnosis or a diagnosis of a disease. This bill would allow a patient to directly access physical therapy services without being referred by a physician, provided that the treatment is within the scope of the physical therapist and if the following conditions are met. If the PT has reason to believe that the patient has signs or symptoms of a condition that requires treatment beyond the scope of practice of a physical therapist, the physical therapist shall refer the patient to a physician, an osteopathic physician, or to a dentist, podiatrist, or chiropractor. The physical therapist shall disclose to the patient any financial interest in treating the patient, and the physical therapist shall notify the patient's physician with the patient's written authorization that the physical therapist is treating the patient. This bill would specify that it does not expand or modify the scope of practice of a physical therapist, including the prohibition on a physical therapist to diagnose a disease. This bill would also specify that it does not require a healthcare service plan or insurer to provide coverage for direct access to treatment by a physical therapist. This bill changes the scope of practice of a physical therapist by allowing a physical therapist to make a physical therapy diagnosis and allowing a physical therapist to treat patients without a referral from a physician. The board has taken opposed positions in the past on bills that allowed for direct patient access to physical therapy services. The board was opposed to these bills because they expanded the scope of practice for physical therapists by allowing them to see patients directly without having the patient first seen by a physician, which puts patients at risk. Patient's condition cannot be accurately determined without first being examined by a physician, as physical therapists are not trained to make these comprehensive assessments and diagnosis. Staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board oppose this bill, but I need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
And question, if I could?
I need a second.
sorry.
Second? I'll second it. Any comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, I'm confused, even though I supported the oppose. But I thought it said on one point, it does not expand or modify the scope of practice. Well, to me, making a diagnosis absolutely does. That seems like an internal contradiction.
Well, it makes that statement in the bill, but it also does allow for direct access and allow for the diagnosis. So
I mean, to me, the most important thing of anything is the diagnosis. So that to me is whether or not that's appropriate or not, but to say it's not a change is, I think, very inaccurate in the analysis. And if people feel that physical therapists should in fact diagnose, then that's a different question. But to say that this bill does not allow it, it's not a change,
Well,
it's a significant change.
well, actually, that's what the bill says. So that's why the analysis includes that information.
No,
but,
I
yeah.
appreciate that, but
Yeah.
that makes me skeptical if the analysis of it is not accurate, because to diagnose something is the essence of it. I wouldn't. That's all.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
I would disagree from the perspective of that it's poorly written. Yeah, it's poorly written. But from the perspective that they're going to diagnose something that has to do with physical therapy, they're not just diagnosing brain cancer, they're not diagnosing melanoma, they're not diagnosing lung trouble, they're diagnosing that if you've fallen down, you've got a sore muscle that needs to be treated. So, I mean, let's get our hands around what it is they're talking about doing. I would venture to say it's poorly written. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't disagree with the idea that there should be direct access to service by a physical therapist. They're trained to do a job. They have a scope of practice that they do their job. That the issue is that the insurance company doesn't pay, that's the issue. That's what direct access means. That it should have a time limit. It should have, but here they put more than they had in the last thing. The last time when we opposed, here they've put that they are going to sign or state that if there's conditions that they shouldn't be treating, that they're going to be sending them to the doctor. That they're going to notify the doctor of what they're doing. So I'm not so, I think it's poorly written. I'm going to be honest. I've said it many times, so you got the point. It's poorly written. But I think the premise of the idea of within the scope of practice of physical therapists doing what they're supposed to do, I think that we have to understand that they're trained. It's very hard to get into the School of Physical Therapy. They are in major universities across the state and across the country. There are very few of them. There's 13,000 or something applications for the one at the school at USC. These people are coming out, they're trained to do something. So I don't understand how we let them go to school, we let them pay the money, we give them a certificate, and then we say you can't do your job. So and we've gone through this already, and I understand that. So I'm just, not that I disagree with you, Dr. Salmonson, not that I disagree with you, Dr. Levine, but I think that we as a board have got to stand up and understand that if we are expecting people to do their jobs, let them do their jobs. Otherwise, we shouldn't be involved.
There is one thing I want to point out. The last bill that you're referring to from last year, it did have a time limit. This bill doesn't include a time limit, and it actually says the PT shall notify the patient's physician, but only if the patient signs off on it. So it's not. there were stricter requirements in the last bill actually than there are in this bill, and you know,
The stricter requirements, though, and all due deference, are, this one says that they will be in direct contact with the doctor if it's something they can't deal with. The other one said that they would have 4 or 5 appointments in a month. So I'm not sure if 4 or 5 appointments or a month is better or worse than being in contact with a medical professional. So from my perspective, I would rather go with a support if amended versus a non-support, but that would be my preference, and it's not my preference, so it's not my
I
choice.
think for me, there are 2 issues. One is that, again, the term of art diagnose, which up
It
until,
says,
I
in quotes,
understand.
physical therapy diagnosis. It doesn't say blankly diagnosis. The analysis bill would allow PTs to make a, quote, physical therapy diagnosis, quote. It says there continually above the description of the current legislation, bill would allow a physical therapist to make a physical therapy diagnosis. So I think we need to be clear on what the bill says and not leave out.
Currently, what happens is the physical the physical therapist devises or designs a therapeutic regimen based on the diagnosis that the patient comes with. Now, there are physical therapists who provide, who have direct access. Someone comes in and says, I've got tense muscles, or I've got this or that. There's nothing that prohibits or requires them to turn the patient away. They do not currently diagnose. They prescribe a regimen of therapy based on the diagnosis that the patient has, and it may have been, 6 months ago. I saw the orthopedic surgeon. I tore my meniscus.
This is based on insurance. If your doctor gives you a prescription to go to a physical therapist for a treatment what the doctor's decided, your insurance company pays. If you decide to go to a physical therapist for whatever injury you think you might have, that physical therapist may treat you. The insurance is not, you pay for your treatment. The physical therapist treats you. In all due respect, I think that this is a question of access to care, and the issue is, do we want a physical therapist who's trained to do physical therapy to be able to treat you and get reimbursement from the insurance company or not? And it doesn't say that in the thing, but that's the whole thing that's holding this back, in my opinion, of course.
There is something in the bill around reimbursement, right?
yes, it actually it says that they don't have to. Or,
Right. This does not actually constitute a basis for coverage. The passage of this bill would not create circumstances which would require coverage by an insurance company.
Yeah, of course.
And again, my concerns are the use of the term diagnosis, because at least in my experience, physical therapists work with physicians in their specialty, which is to match a treatment plan to a diagnosis. And the second is to ask someone to refer based on a condition that they aren't able to treat is fine, but what if they aren't able to recognize it? And they're not necessarily trained to recognize or diagnose conditions that might be contributing to the presenting symptom. And so we're relying on a physical therapist to recognize in all circumstances when they ought to be referring to a physician.
I just have to speak from personal experience. I just went through 5 months of physical therapy with an entire practice that it's made of doctors of physical therapy. And my physician didn't know what was wrong. They made the diagnosis, they developed the treatment, and went back to her. And we're seeing more of these practices come up where they are doctors of physical therapy, and they are actually, the physicians are just saying, this patient's got low back pain, can you figure out what this is? And that's what occurred in my case. So I think that's maybe where this is going, but, that seems to be out there already.
I would suggest that nobody goes into a physical therapy office because they don't expect to be treated for something. So that the patient has walked into an office where they expect that someone is going to alleviate some reason they've come in for, has to be an assumption that we all have to make. Whether we think that there might be something more wrong or more worse with the patient and they should be seeing a doctor in the first place is really the question. When doctors don't know what to do, they send you to physical therapists. That's why they're sending you to physical. They're sending you there for treatment. It's either that or pills or a shot, so they're sending you for treatment. So I think at some point that the medical board is going to have to grapple with what it wants to see these whatever you want to call them, professionals within their scope of practice doing what they've been trained to do. So at some point, I think that I don't know that that's where you want to go, but if we're not going to be at the table at all, we're not going to be able to discuss what we want as part and parcel of any kind of bill. So it's either that's where it's at, I think.
Dr. Diego?
I was just trying to look back to see if they're, following that conversation, if there's something there also that says, and at what point they report back, right? Because that's what's missing. Is that missing?
Missing is the number of visits they can go to without being in consultation with the doctor.
Exactly, yeah.
It
At
says
what
now if
point?
a PT has reason to believe the patient has signs or symptoms of a condition that requires treatment beyond the scope of practice, then the PT shall refer the patient to a physician, an osteopathic physician, or to a dentist, podiatrist, or chiropractor.
So now a chiropractor is in the same position as a doctor. You all like that one, huh?
The dentist, that's a good one.
Well, that could be TMJ, the TMJ. That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, so who made the motion? Who made the motion?
Dr.
I
Salmonson
did.
moved it and I seconded it.
So are
Yeah.
you at all willing, are you at all open to some kind of an amendment, or not at the table at all?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I mean, to me, the best scenarios I see are when doctors and physical therapists work together, and I think going in the direction of less physician involvement in the diagnostic part is sort of not the direction that I see as a positive.
So let me just suggest to you that as far as an ethical issue, I would agree with you, doctors and physical therapists should work hand in hand, but it becomes the issue of the spouse of the medical professional providing the alternative service, so that the doctor prescribing to the spouse who's a physical therapist that you want this surgery, this is the physical therapist you've got to go see. That's also not, that's not legal. If I'm not mistaken, that's a stark violation. Stark violation. But I know of situations where so I'm not looking that, when you say that they have to work hand in hand, I think that also has to be.
Well, a collaborative, a team. I mean, I
Fine.
think, because I kind of envision that there's certain imaging studies that, and then maybe we're going to say the physical therapist should be ordering them. I know that perhaps it's wrong to limiting the ordering of imaging studies
Well,
to physicians.
I can tell you that my physical therapist takes a look at my MRIs and is able to take a look at the MRI the same way. I'm not. It's not a question of that. The issue is that you have to have the tools that you have been trained to use and use them. Again, this bill is poorly written.
Yeah, I guess I was just hung up on the internal inconsistencies of the bill that made me uncomfortable with being, to kind of tell us there's no change when there is a change. Just is, I suppose we could say, neutral, or heavy-duty amendments.
I think to me, the largest deficiency in this is that there is not a mandatory report back after a specific period of time. It shouldn't be left to anybody, no matter what their profession is. That it's just, if the patient says that okay, we'll send it back. So I would hope that we somehow.
So could we? Do we have the option of just referring this to the full board discussion and deferring on taking?
Perfect.
Why don't we do that? Because ultimately it is the board that has to vote on this, and we can reflect that there are differences of.
Wait. So, I mean, I would agree with you. Referring it back to the whole board, you're going to get the same discussion you got today. So the issue is that within time constraints of the legislation process, is there any opportunity to do anything between now and then, the end of the month with the board? I don't know this legislator, but this previously came from Darrell Steinberg, but his was much better, much.
I mean, I could definitely call the
I mean,
legislative office. I mean,
you're not going to get any. I mean, Dr. Levine, all due fairness, you're not going to get a better discussion at the board meeting with more people.
So Ms. Shipsky's concern is the lack of
Fine, mine as
feedback.
well.
Mine is the use.
We need to really stress that any of these bills, with other allied professionals, that there has to be collaboration and that it has to be a system of collaboration. Otherwise, we're going to go far off afield with everyone doing what they want to do, and that's not the purpose. I think the purpose is to expand access, but it has to be within the healthcare system.
And I'm going to say that I continue to have concern with the use of the term diagnosis. Because
I would go along with you. I'll take that. I would appreciate. I would direct you, please, to go back to staff and to go back to this person, Wykowski, I guess the name is, and suggest seriously that this needs to be improved. That this is not a way to bring a bill to out at a period. I mean, no offense. Maybe it's inappropriate to expect some kind of engagement on a collaborative, positive method, and we'd like to be positive, but this is. So I would go along the time limit, absolutely, the collaboration and lack thereof noted, as well as the term physical therapy diagnosis. It's got to allow physical therapists to do the job that they've been trained to within the scope of practice as they know it.
Well, what I can do if we defer it to the board is, make the call or stop by the author's office and just say, this is kind of how the conversation went, and we're going to be voting on this at the full board, and just give them a heads up and what kind of things we're looking for without actually taking a position, because, even if we take one today, it's not a real position.
Right, but I do believe in the Physical Therapy Act. It does reference physical therapy diagnosis, just like the Nurse Practice Act. There is a thing called nursing diagnosis, and so
there is.
So that could be in that context that they're using it. But I think we have to be very clear what that parameter means.
Just a point of parliamentary procedure, we sort of have a motion and a second hanging out there, so I guess if we were to withdraw that motion and that second.
I'd be happy to withdraw the motion.
Then I think it would essentially
second.
die of its own accord, and then we could proceed, in fact, with this deferral pending additional information from the author's office.
And can I ask, before we close this item, which we'll vote on, we'll have to start again with the motion, but, right? No. Okay. Defer, but to ask if there's any public comment on
Actually,
it.
you can just take away your second, and it dies
I
for
did.
lack of a second.
I did.
I've been a therapist, a massage therapist for 30 years.
Can you come speak to tell us who you are and speak into the microphone? Thank you.
My name is Victoria Edwards, and I'm Assistant to Frank Cooney, working on the Cancer Bill 1278. That's why we're here. But I would just offer, besides a dictionary, I'm not a linguistic attorney or anything, but assessment. Diagnosis is a word that the medical doctors, seem to own, And in my years of being a therapist, to use that word with a client was like, you're going to get condemned and go, somewhere down there, dark and hot. So, everyone has had to be very, very careful talking to people about what you're allowed to say. And I've worked as a therapist, 30, 40 years with lots of people. And I don't diagnose, I suggest, I make assessments. There's a lot of other words. And so my contribution to the people Wykowski, who wrote this, physical therapists are wonderful people. They do great things for people, and they deserve to get paid just like everyone else. That, they get a thesaurus and they start looking up terminology that they can work with if that's the problem. Anyway, that's just my input.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Could you fill out a slip just so we have your name? Sure. Thank you. All right.
Okay, so the next bill is AB 1278 Hueso. Just a point of reference, Assemblymember Hueso is now a senator, so this bill number will be changing because they've told them that they have to go find a Senate bill now, but it's going to have the same language, so I'm just going to go over it. So I analyzed this bill as it's going to be amended, so it will be in print by our board meeting. So this bill is sponsored by the California Citizens for Health Freedom. This bill would allow a physician to prescribe integrative cancer treatment under specified circumstances. Current law, Health and Safety Code Section 109-300, restricts cancer therapy exclusively to conventional drugs, surgery, and radiation, those that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This bill would define integrative cancer treatment as the use of a combination of evidence-based substances or therapies for the purpose of reducing the size of cancer, slowing the progression of cancer, or improving the quality of life of a patient with cancer. This bill would specify that a treatment meets the evidence-based medical standard if the methods of treatment are recognized by the Physician's Data Query of the National Cancer Institute, or if the methods of treatment have been reported in at least 3 peer-reviewed articles published in complementary and alternative medicine journals to reduce the size of cancer, slow the progression of cancer, improve the quality of life of a patient with cancer, or if the methods have been published in at least 3 peer-reviewed scientific medical journals. This bill would prohibit a physician from recommending or prescribing integrative cancer treatment unless specified informed consent is given. The treatment must meet the evidence-based medical standard, and the physician must comply with the patient reevaluation requirements and the standards of care for integrative cancer treatment. In order to comply with the informed consent requirements, the physician must have the patient sign a form that either includes the contact information for the physician who is providing the patient conventional care, or that the patient has declined to be under the care of an oncologist or other physician providing conventional cancer care. The form must also include a statement that says the type of care the patient was receiving or that is being recommended is not the standard of care for treating cancer in California, that the standard of care for treating cancer in California consists of radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery, and that the treatment the physician will be prescribing or recommending is not approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration for the treatment of cancer, that the care that the patient will be receiving or is being recommended is not mutually exclusive of the patient receiving conventional cancer treatment. The form must also include specified written statements. This bill would require a physician prescribing integrative cancer treatment to comply with patient reevaluation requirements, which require that the patient must be informed of the measurable results achieved, the physician must reevaluate the treatment when progress stalls or reverses, and the patient must be informed about and agree to any proposed changes in treatments. This bill would also set forth the standards of care in prescribing integrative cancer treatment that the physician must comply with. The physician must provide the patient information regarding the treatment prescribed. The physician must make a good faith effort to obtain all relevant charts, records, and laboratory results relating to the patient's conventional cancer care prior to prescribing or changing treatment. At the request of the patient, the physician must make a good faith effort to coordinate the patient's care with the physician providing conventional cancer care to the patient. And at the request of the patient, the physician must provide a synopsis of any treatment rendered to the physician providing conventional cancer care to the patient. This bill would specify that failure to comply with the bill's provisions would constitute unprofessional conduct and cause for discipline by that individual's licensing entity. According to the author, integrative cancer treatment gives consumers options for care and helps patients cope with the common side effects of chemotherapy and radiation. The author believes this bill will provide cancer patients with more options to complement conventional therapy. Staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board take a neutral position on this bill. I need a motion.
Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion among the board members?
Just out of curiosity, why would we not want to support that, just for purposes of discussion?
I mean, we could support, I think it's for the same reasons as 154, like we're taking a cautious approach, but I think we could also support this bill as well. I mean, I think they made a lot of efforts in this bill to make sure that patients are informed about conventional cancer therapy, makes them sign, written statements, makes them give them those statements, makes them meet some kind of evidence-based standards, are really trying to make sure that that kind of what, I don't know if you remember of Mr. Serrano-Sewell said in our last board meeting about, the quackery kind of concerns. And so that's why we were kind of taking a cautious approach. But, I mean, I think we could go support too.
And as you read it, it sounded like there were some pretty good safeguards in there. Even though I'm conservative in a lot of ways, thinking that this seems like a pretty reasonable bill.
Dr. Diego?
It just didn't seem to me, though, Dr. Solomonson, that it really specified who was going to be giving the treatment. So that was my only concern, and that's why I would say, neutral, because, you know what I mean? It's like,
physicians.
Right, but what kind of training did they get for this type of treatment versus the oncologist? That's why I go.
I think the issue is, in all due honesty, that in the state of California, the only method for cancer treatment is radiation and chemotherapy, end of discussion. So what this is doing is allowing doctors to suggest other forms of treatment. That's all. I don't think that they're asking for other providers to be able to do it. It's just for,
Yeah, and that was my question also, because it says 109.295, paragraph 109.295, it says, any individual, person, firm, association, or other entity engaged or representing himself or herself in the diagnosis, treatment, alleviation, or cure of cancer. And entities and associations and firms don't diagnose, treat, or alleviate or cure cancer. It's practitioners.
Well, and that's part of existing law, though, too. So they're just adding to existing law. So, and it's what information is given to the California Department of Public Health. That it's in the Health and Safety Code sections.
Oh,
so
well, there you go.
It's just adding to that more information be given to the department, but it's not allowing anyone other than a physician to. This is focused on a physician.
This is about physicians.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Nurse practitioners or PAs.
Physicians.
Just physicians.
And just to comment, I understand that. I understood that it was physicians, but what it doesn't necessarily specify is what kind of a training. If it was all going to be oncologists to offer optional treatment, that's great. But is it all of a sudden going to be the plastic surgeons trying to do oncology?
Which is part of the reason we kind of wanted to take a cautious approach.
Yeah, that's why I
mean,
would support that versus support the bill.
but I leave it to the board.
But we never legislate what physician specialty can do what treatment. So,
Correct. Mr. Cuny.
My name is Frank Cooney, and I'm the Director of California Citizens for Health Freedom, and we are the prime organization behind this particular bill. And of course, it's strictly for physicians. What it does open up the door to is that physicians that deal with health products that are in the health field to be able to be utilized. And we're talking about herbs or nutritional supplements in that particular area, which is not done by the FDA at all. It doesn't deal with that area. And there's been a whole range of research in that particular area that shows deep benefits for this process. There are some others, but that's primarily the main reason, is to move away from the harsh approach of chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, to a much easier approach and a more health approach that deals with it. And the alternative physicians that deal with that try to determine first what caused the cancer and deal with the causation of the cancer. And often it's diet, sometimes it's lifestyle, sometimes it's genetic inheritance will move in that direction, but often it's toxins within the body. And the effort then is to work with natural removal of toxins in the body and build the immune system so the immune system functions better is the major focus on that particular process. And I might indicate I've been to Arizona and to Nevada and visited the clinics there, and both of them were run by physicians who fled California because of the existing law. And the president of the Arizona Homeopathic Group wants to come back to California. He's an outstanding physician and says, but I can't treat people under the existing law. We want to have that changed. And the physician who started the Homeopathic Group up in Nevada, he's deceased now, was a physician who fled California and on that process. And I suspect there are many others. And there are physicians who would come to California and be able to practice in California if the regulations were eased up so they would be able to come and practice good medicine. We're not talking about quacks or fraud or anybody who's not a physician. We're talking about competent physicians to being in the field to be able to offer these type of services. Any questions that you'd like to ask me? Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor for a neutral position on the bill. Any other comments from members of the public? If not, can I have a vote from those all of whom would vote aye on supporting on a neutral position on the bill?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Any nays? I think not. I think we got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next bill is AB 1308 Bonilla, and this bill is sponsored by the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and would allow a licensed midwife to directly obtain supplies, order testing, and receive reports that are necessary to the licensed midwife's practice of midwifery and consistent with the scope of practice for a licensed midwife. This bill would also require the Medical Board of California to adopt regulations by July 1st, 2015, defining the appropriate standard of care and level of supervision required for the practice of midwifery and identifying complications necessitating referral to a physician. This bill would require a licensed midwife to disclose in oral and written form to a prospective client the specific arrangement for the referral of complications to a physician and surgeon. Although required by law, physician supervision is essentially unavailable to licensed midwives performing home births, as California physicians are generally prohibited by their malpractice insurance companies from providing supervision of licensed midwives who perform home births. The physician supervision requirement creates numerous barriers to care in that if the licensed midwife needs to transfer a patient baby to the hospital, many hospitals will not accept a patient transfer from a licensed midwife as a primary provider who does not have a supervising physician. Licensed midwives also have difficulty securing diagnostic lab accounts, even though they are legally allowed to have lab accounts. Many labs require proof of physician supervision. In addition, licensed midwives are not able to obtain the medical supplies they have been trained and are expected to use, oxygen, and medical supplies that are included in the approved licensed midwifery school curriculum. The inability for a licensed midwife to order lab tests often means the patient will not obtain the necessary tests to help the midwife monitor the patient during pregnancy. The board, through the Midwifery Advisory Council, has held many meetings regarding physician supervision of licensed midwives and has attempted to create regulations to address this issue. The concepts of collaboration, such as required consultation, referral, transfer of care, and physician liability, have been discussed among the interested parties with little success. There is disagreement over the appropriate level of physician supervision. The Midwifery Advisory Council has also held meetings regarding the lab order and medical supplies medication issues and has attempted to create regulatory language to address this issue. However, based upon discussion with interested parties, it appears that both issues need to be addressed through the legislative process. This bill would address one of the barriers of care by allowing a licensed midwife to directly obtain supplies, order testing, and receive reports necessary to the licensed midwife's practice of midwifery, which would help to ensure consumer protection. This bill would also require the board to adopt regulations to address physician supervision and to identify complications necessitating referral to a physician. However, the board has been unsuccessful in endeavors to adopt regulations regarding physician supervision in the past. Board staff will continue to work with the author's office and sponsors on language that will help to solve the issue of physician supervision and remove barriers to care, while at the same time help to ensure consumer protection. Board staff is suggesting that the committee recommend that the board support this bill if it is amended to better clarify what the supervision requirement should be in statute versus in regulation. And I've actually talked to the sponsors today, and this is definitely a work in progress. This is just kind of to get us to the table. So we will be continuing to work together, but we would like to support it with some amendments.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
You have right here.
All right. Any comments, questions from members of the board? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I wonder if, we could just suggest supporting their access to the supplies that they need and just bifurcate out that supervision business. Because I think they'll get their things right away, but I still feel demanding that we somehow implement the supervision arm when there are such barriers, namely the liability issue, to me are lumping two very disparate kind of things. So I would be completely supportive of them getting the oxygen, go for that. And then let's separately try to solve what seems like a kind of a regulatory conundrum.
Well,
I don't know if the authors would be open to that, but
we could take a supportive amended position and see what kind of, because basically right now they're trying to basically come up with something. So we could see kind of what they come up with. And then, of course, I'm going to bring it back to the board again. And if language is in there to address the supervision issue, which right now it really isn't, it's just telling us to do something.
It's just demanding it again. And
So-
whereas I think at least I am, supportive of their getting the oxygen and getting lab tests, but at the same time, somehow saying solve this magical problem that's kind of a legislative issue where supervision's being mandated.
So I would recommend that what Dr.
just
Salmonson is
clarify.
suggesting, it would be
Yeah.
very nice,
Oh,
except for the
thank
fact,
you.
except for the fact that this
Thank you.
sponsor of this bill is the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which we've not had in the past. Otherwise, I would agree with you that, you might as well do it incrementally. But given who is sponsoring this bill, let's assume that they've got some strength and power in the legislature.
But I like, and Ms. Whitney correctly points out the staff's recommendation of saying it needs a statute fix and not just
Exactly.
try to.
Yes, exactly.
So thank you.
And this seems to reflect a commitment on the part of ACOG to actually solve the problem.
Absolutely.
Which is their problem, actually.
Well, it was handed to
ACOG's
them.
problem. Yeah, well, it is
Yeah,
their.
it was
Well,
handed
but
to
they've
them.
been coming to meetings, they've been showing up, they've been participating, they've been engaged. Staff has been really very helpful, and it's a different mood
It's great.
in the room.
Okay, so
Air
we
conditioning
have,
doesn't work.
Can I ask a question? Ms. Mose, if I may. When you talk to this author's office, one of the things that we talk about supplies, could you clarify whether it's the common understanding that supplies means dangerous drugs, because those two aren't necessarily the same thing. To get to dangerous drugs, issuing a drug order, issuing a prescription, you're going to have to amend the pharmacy law.
Well, it doesn't really specify in the bill, so.
Where do you see dangerous drug?
Obtain supplies, order testing, and receive reports that are
The
necessary.
reason I say that is we ran some regulations one time that talked about analgesics and other things. An analgesic per se is something that's, you acquire via prescription.
Where is it listed in this?
No, I know it's not in here. I'm just
Oh,
saying, I'm just asking for clarification if that issue has come up.
Did you want it to
I did
be
not
added?
ask that
No,
question.
I'm not, I'm just seeking clarification. I'm not,
so clarification that the word supplies does not include the
You want to make
intention
sure it also
of,
doesn't include opiates?
a prescription, dangerous drugs
Narcotics?
includes, yeah, so
Not yet.
they can't prescribe and they can't dispense. So, okay. So just clarification that that isn't the intent. And
Okay, will do.
so is there any public comment on supportive amendment on this bill and our position? Mr. Cooney?
I am not a midwife, but I've attended many, many meetings over many, many years on this issue. And I salute the board when they created the advisory committee. And the advisory committee has come up with recommendations. And I think it's great that you're coming to grips with it. I might indicate when you're talking about supplies, it could be put in there that medications or supplies that are within their scope of practice. They are trained to use certain materials, and I don't know what they are into it, but they are trained to have it, and it's within their scope of practice, and that might be able to answer that practice by having wording similar to that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so all in favor of a support if amended?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? Thank you.
Next bill, SB 352 Pavley. This bill is sponsored by the California Academy of Physician Assistants and would allow physician assistants, nurse practitioners, and nurse midwives to supervise medical assistants. Medical assistants are unlicensed personnel trained to perform basic administrative, clerical, and technical support services in a medical office or clinical setting. These services include, but are not limited to, taking blood pressure, charting height and weight, administering medication, performing skin tests, etc. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics in 2011 reported that there's nearly 82,000 medical assistants employed in California. Currently, a physician must be present in the practice site to supervise a medical assistant in most settings. Physician assistants and nurse practitioners can currently supervise medical assistants in licensed community and free clinics. If a physician is not present, medical assistants are limited to performing administrative and clerical duties and cannot perform or assist with simple technical support services if the physician is not on the premises. According to the sponsors, physicians have been delegating the task of supervising medical assistants when the physician is not in the office for over a decade in community clinics, and the Physician Assistant Board and the Department of Consumer Affairs have not reported any patient safety issues or disciplinary action related to physician assistant supervision and medical assistance. With healthcare reform being implemented in 2014, this bill may help to accommodate the expected increase in patients, as well as to help ensure that medical assistants are being supervised while a physician is not physically present in the office. given that physician assistants, nurse practitioners, and nurse midwives are currently allowed to supervise medical assistants in some settings now, and that this authority would have to be delegated by the physician, it makes sense for this to be allowed in all settings. However, existing law prohibits physicians from aiding and abetting unlicensed individuals from engaging in the practice of medicine. Board staff suggests that this bill be amended to include language to ensure that if a physician assistant, nurse practitioner, or nurse midwife were to allow the medical assistant to perform tasks that are not in the approved scope of responsibility, that the physician assistant, nurse practitioner, or nurse midwife would be held responsible, similar to physicians, and subject to discipline by their licensing board. Staff suggests that the committee recommend that the board take a neutral if amended position on this bill, but I would need a motion.
So moved.
Second? I'll sec. All right, we have a second. Ms. Shipsky seconded.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, well, that said, why were we not thinking of support if amended?
And we could. We don't really oversee PAs or NMs, which is why we were going with the NA, but we could take a support if amended.
Except in a sense we indirectly do, because do not PAs work under a delegation of services agreement of physicians?
That's
so I would think that, you know, if we think that it's appropriate if amended, that it seems kind of appropriate.
So how about if I change the motion to support if amended, please? Second also?
Okay, so we have a support if amended with the clarity on the amendment.
But very much they have to have that same thing, otherwise opposed, you know, but we feel strongly. We're not neutral on this one.
So the amendment would be similar to what's in law for physicians.
Absolutely.
That would basically say that if a PA, NP, or NM were we found aiding and abetting unlicensed individuals, that basically they'd be subject to discipline. It's similar to what physicians are held liable if they're allowing an MA to do something that's not in their scope of responsibility.
Right.
So currently that's not in the bill, and that's what the amendment is?
Exactly.
Is all these pieces of paper for that sentence?
Well, sure.
Do we have any other board member comments or head shaking? Okay. Any members of the public want to comment on this bill? If not, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay.
I'm happy to report I'm on my last bill. Okay. This is one that a lot of you will be interested in. Okay, SB 809, DeSaulnier and Steinberg is sponsored by the Department of Justice and would establish the Cures Fund that would be funded by an annual 1.16% licensing, certification, and renewal fee increase for licensing of boards that are authorized to prescribe or dispense Schedule 2, 3, or 4 controlled substances. This includes the Medical Board of California. This bill would make the money in the Cures Fund available for allocation to the Department of Justice upon appropriation by the legislature for the purposes of funding the Cures program. This bill would specify that the fee increase shall not exceed the reasonable costs associated with maintaining Cures. The 1.16% annual fee would result in an increase of $18 for physician renewal fees, $9 each year of the 2-year renewal cycle, and a $9 initial licensing fee increase. This bill would also impose an unspecified one-time tax on health insurers for the purposes of upgrading the Cures system. And it's unspecified because it's a blank in the bill right now. This bill would impose an unspecified ongoing tax on manufacturers of controlled substances for the purposes of creating and maintaining a new enforcement team in DOJ, which would focus on prescription diversion and abuse and criminal activity associated with bringing larger quantities of illegal prescription drugs into California. This was mentioned earlier in the Education Committee today. This team would coordinate with state, federal, and local law enforcement entities and work with various healthcare boards and departments to conduct investigations based on Cures data and intelligence. Once Cures is funded, upgraded, and able to handle inquiries from all eligible prescribers and dispensers in California, this bill would require the Department of Justice to notify all prescribers and dispensers who have submitted applications to Cures that they are capable of accommodating this workload. The Department of Justice would also be required to notify the legislature and post the notification on their website. Once the Department of Justice issues this notification, all prescribers and dispensers eligible to prescribe and dispense Schedule 2, 3, and 4 controlled substances would be required to access and consult the electronic history of controlled substances dispensed to a patient under his or her care prior to prescribing or dispensing a Schedule 2, 3, or 4 controlled substance. This bill contains an urgency clause, which means it would take effect immediately once signed into law by the governor. Board staff has a concern in relation to collection of the renewal fee. There needs to be an implementation schedule included, as the board sends out renewal date notices 90 days in advance, and we need to give licensees appropriate notice of their renewal fee increase. Board staff is also suggesting that the fee increase not be an annual fee increase, but a 1.16% increase on licensing and renewals. So in fact, it would be $9 for initial licensing and $9 for renewals. This bill requires physicians to utilize cures prior to prescribing Schedule 2, 3, and 4 controlled substances once DOJ has provided notice that the system is capable. However, there is no penalty associated if a physician does not comply. Requiring a physician to utilize cures each time they prescribe a Schedule 2, 3, or 4 controlled substance, and also requiring the pharmacist to utilize cures before they dispense that same prescription may be overly excessive. In addition, placing a tax on manufacturers to support a new enforcement team in the Department of Justice may be premature, as cures will not be upgraded for some time. The board believes cures is a very important enforcement tool and an effective aid for physicians to use to prevent doctor shopping. Although the board currently helps to fund cures at a cost of $150,000 each year, these funds could not be used for staffing. The board is aware of the issues Department of Justice is facing related to insufficient staffing and funding for cures. And due to the importance of this program, staff is suggesting that the board support any effort to get cures more fully funded in order for the prescription drug monitoring program to be at optimum operating capacity. Board staff suggests that the committee recommend that the board take a support and concept position, as this bill is a work in progress, with the following noted concerns. Fee increase for renewals should be biennial versus annual. An implementation schedule for the fee increase should be addressed. The requirement for the use of cures should include a minimum penalty if it is not used. And DOJ enforcement teams should not be funded until cures system is fully operational and upgraded. I would need a motion.
So do I have a motion for
I'll
support
move
in concept?
Support and concept, I'll move the motion. Okay. Now,
All right, so we have a support in concept motion on the floor. Ms. Yaroslavsky.
I'm going to let Ms. Shipsky.
Okay.
I want to formulate better my thoughts because
All right.
Ms.
Are you
Shipsky.
formulating? Oh, she's formulating. I can hear it. A couple of things. I think we do need to support it in concept. However, I really don't think the physician should bear the brunt of the cost for this system. I think we've talked about that previously. I mean, there's no mention in here about the pharmacy dispensers, and there are many more of those than there are physicians.
I didn't go through the whole list, but I can go through.
It's all prescribers.
So it's actually all boards of that have licensees that are authorized to prescribe or dispense Schedule 2, 3, or 4 controlled substances. So I can go through the list for clarity purposes. So that's the Medical Board of California, the Dental Board of California, Board of Pharmacy, and that includes wholesalers, non-resident wholesalers, and veterinary food animal drug retailers, the Veterinary Medical Board, the Board of Registered Nursing, the Physician Assistant Board, the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, the State Board of Optometry, and the California Board of Podiatric Medicine.
Right, they do drops. However, what we're not also focusing on is the genesis of the problem, and that is the drug manufacturers. And I know that there's some discussion in there, but I think really, quite honestly, they're profiting from the overprescribing of these very expensive medications that are charged. And both in the Medi-Cal system, Medi-Cal pays a tremendous amount of money for these medications. So, I would hope that there be some movement that, the pharmaceutical companies bear the costs of this system, since they've caused the problem.
How the bill is written now is they put in unspecified ongoing tax on manufacturers, but not to fund or upgrade the cure system. It's to fund DOJ's enforcement team. So they are putting some kind of fee on the manufacturers, but not specifically.
I just personally think it's inequitable to tax the providers on the problem that is being caused by the product.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have the product, you wouldn't have the problem. So I would hope that we could somehow maybe communicate that we support the concept, because we know cures is extremely important and it does need to be funded, but that perhaps the source of the funding needs to come from the pharmaceutical industry.
And I'd like to add a couple of other issues to the if amended list, one of which is a percentage as opposed to a flat dollar amount puts in an automatic inflator unrelated to whether or not the costs of actually maintaining the system inflate $9 as opposed to 1.16%, because there may be other reasons that increase the licensing fee. If we end up with a tax on licensees, then it ought to be a dollar amount not linked to whatever happens to licensing fee. The second issue is that this relates to the in-concept piece. This is a moving target, and I think, having listened to the hopes and dreams of Mr. Small, who is now the Maytag repairman, who is single-handedly maintaining the Cures system, he estimated that it would take 100 individuals to enroll all the prescribers in California. He would have to increase his staffing by somewhere up to 100 people if he were to ever enroll 100% of eligible prescribers. The hope is that in the rebooting and redesign of the system, there will be a way to deem prescribers who are already authenticated through, for example, a secure electronic health system, so that if I go to enter in an electronic ordering system a Schedule II or Schedule III drug, Cures will automatically populate my screen with a patient activity report, not requiring me to enroll, only requiring me to continue to be authenticated in my system, which connects, and this is the design, the intended design of the Cures system. The level of detail in the bill about, DOJ issues a notice and then everybody has to enroll. I think it's too detailed for, given that, we don't know the extent to which we can actually, and how long it will take to achieve the desired system design, which would make life easier for the DOJ as well as for the physicians and pharmacists in the state of California. So I think perhaps expressing in the legislation the intent that anyone who will be prescribing these drugs will either, have an automatic access to the information or will be required to enroll. And again, I think, as you've said, the question of how many times on one prescription Cures needs to be queried and who ought to be doing that under what circumstances may be more appropriate for content experts to figure out, and whether in fact all Schedule IV drugs need to be, even though we're collecting data appropriately on Schedule IV drugs, should all prescriptions for Schedule IV drugs be queried? I'm not so sure that's the case, but I think that, that goes beyond my clinical expertise to make that decision. So just adding to the list. Dr. Salmonson.
Well, I think it's kind of a corollary. I was concerned about the penalty for not using Cures, since it's a bit cumbersome to, I have to say I've tried and I didn't have all my data at the forum, unfortunately. So then it's like I'd be afraid to prescribe anything until, even a 5 or for, whatever. So, yeah, that penalty in there until we even know how easy it is to participate.
I think we were just making the point if you're going to put a requirement, but then it's not really a requirement if there's no teeth behind it, I guess. But yeah, point well taken. So if we're working on actually how that's going to work, then that may be premature.
So let me ask you a question. Is it possible to suggest that the people that should be paying for this is anyone that prescribes Schedule II, III, or IV controlled substance, first of all, as well as anyone that is filling a prescription for 2, 3, and 4 medication, as well as manufacturers for 2, 3, and 4 drugs?
Well, I think it includes most of those except for the manufacturers, because it requires all of the boards to license individuals who can prescribe Schedule II, III, and 4 drugs or dispense.
Well, if you don't prescribe those medicines, I'm not sure why. But my concern is if you're not prescribing those medicines, I assume they're medicines, correct? Substances, abuses. Somehow it seems to me that there seems to be more shared responsibility. So I'm glad that it's not just the pharmacist that's prescribing or filling the prescription, it's the pharmacy that's making money off of the fact that it's being prescribed. It's the insurance company that is, somehow it seems to me that there's, the more people that you have in the pool, and this amount of money is going to reap a huge amount of resources.
We're talking $5 million a year.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Which is not a huge amount of
Well,
expenditure.
but if they could get their computers done right, it shouldn't even cost this kind of money.
And it is not supposed to go over what the actual cost is, so
Okay,
I would
well, we'll
assuming
see.
some adjustments would need to be
We'll
made
see.
once Cures is up and going, and they shouldn't be taking all that money in if they don't.
It's got to be reevaluated also on a yearly basis. I'd like that in the law, too, that the expense of the cost and the program should be reevaluated on a yearly basis.
Ms. Shipsky?
And Jennifer, can you inquire with the authors about seeing if there's a way to get some funding under the Affordable Care Act with the funding of electronic records for meaningful use? Could there not be some way that the state of California, with its physicians, could take advantage of that funding? So one, it might be able to help fund the system, but two, might defray some of the costs for the physicians who are having to access it. If they've got a mandate, if this would qualify under meaningful use, and I think it's 16,000 is not very much, but there's more money coming that perhaps there could be some way California could tap into that big sum of money.
I'll definitely bring it up when I talk to the
Thanks.
author's office.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have enough suggestions for things to think about? Mr. Hepler?
I just have one question, Ms. Mo. So directing your attention to page 4-87, I know I fully understand this is a work in progress. So I'm looking at section as proposed to be included in the bill, section 10, line 15. For the privilege of doing business in the state, a tax is hereby imposed on a one-time basis on all insurers. Could you talk to the author's office if that also extends to like workers' comp insurers, that sort of thing? How broad is insurance? Is that healthcare insurers?
Life and casualty.
Life and casualty, property and casualty. What? My presumption is just those associated with the healthcare bill, but. Thank you.
Any comments from members of the public? We do have one. Long due from the California Medical Association. Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. Long Doe from the California Medical Association. I just have some comments to make. I think our CMA's views are very similar to what's been expressed here because this bill is in the early stages. It is aimed at a very important problem, of course, but we have some concerns to raise and we wanted to share it with the board. CMA, to begin, CMA unequivocally shuns abusive overprescribing of Schedule 2, 3, and 4 controlled substances or the diversion of such prescription drugs. We also recognize that this is a problem that threatens public safety and the quality of medical care. Now, as regards to Cures, CMA has been and continues to be in support of the Cures program. We believe that it can be an effective tool for enforcement, for law enforcement, for regulators, licensing boards, and the physician community to address the problem of abusive overprescribing. Now, in the current form of SB 809, recognizing that it is a moving target, but in its current form, CMA has some concerns. We have concerns that the bill may carry some unintended consequences that could impede the appropriate practice of medicine. Depending on how Cures is set up and how it operates, it may create undue burdens for its users. And moreover, in such circumstances, I think this is something that has been talked about today, the requirement for all eligible prescribers to enroll and to check the database before prescribing any controlled substance or has the potential to interfere with the practice of medicine. CMA believes that the Cures program must be adequately funded and staffed. We believe that tax revenue that's collected from the drug manufacturers and from health insurers, as currently provided in SB 09, is the most appropriate funding source because ultimately the Cures program inures to the benefit of the public. And finally, from the onset, CMA has been engaged in meaningful dialogue with the authors of the bill with the aim of fixing Cures in a way that makes the program reliable, accurate, usable, but without impairing the practice of medicine. And we will continue to work with the authors to try to address the concerns that we've raised.
Thank you, sir. Do I have any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this bill? Seeing none, all in favor of a support in concept?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Simoes. We're halfway through our agenda. So why don't we move on to agenda item 5, which is review and consideration of our administrative procedure manual. Ms. Kirkmeyer will walk us through the changes.
I believe Mr. Hepler is going to join me. Okay. If you would please turn to tab 5, page exec 5-1, you will find the board's revised administrative procedure manual. As you may remember, at the January 31st, 2013 Executive Committee meeting, the Board Member Administrative Procedure Manual was provided to the members with suggested edits. At the meeting, the members approved the recommended edits and requested further edits to the document, specifically in the section on the role of the board officers, committee, chair, and panel officers. And then all of the edits have been made and are now incorporated into the manual that's actually in front of you. But also at that meeting, the members also requested that edits be made to the manual regarding written comments to the board, meetings requested with members by interested parties, and procedures for members when contacted by the media. The document on pages exec 5-2 to 5-19 have the amendments requested by the members at the meeting. In addition, board staff also added in a section on the process for members to follow when they are served with a lawsuit. I'd like to go through each amendment individually. So if you would please turn to exec 5-8 and 5-9. This section incorporates how to handle written comments. So if you want to look at that, I don't know if you would like me to read it, Dr. Levine, or if you want me just to ask if there's any comments on this section or any edits.
I think just asking
folks
if there are any questions.
Then that was basically kind of the direction we received from the committee at the last meeting. So basically, we will obtain the written comment prior to the meetings. We will send that out to the members. Of course, there will be a deadline. We've actually put that we would have to receive it, I believe, within 4 business days prior, and then we will send that out to the members so they will have that if an individual isn't available to attend the actual meeting.
Great. And this was in response to a member of the public concerned that logistics preventing attendance at a meeting. In the face of that, the lack of an ability to distribute written materials to provide information to board members was an impediment to public input, and the board members agreed and asked that this be done.
Okay, all
Thank
right.
you.
Then moving on, I'm going to turn to page exec 5-16 and 5-17. On these pages, staff added a section on meetings with public and interested parties, media inquiries, and service of lawsuits. If you look at the meetings with public and interested parties, you'll see that we have actually said that it's okay to have these meetings, that they may request it of the board member. The board member has the ability to meet with those parties, but we do put specifically in there that we really strongly suggest that you make note that you're speaking on behalf of you as an individual member. This is not the policy of the board. Or this is not the position of the board, and so we just kind of put that in there, and then also that you would you would state that out at the next meeting during the communication with interested parties. Okay, any edits on that section? Okay. Moving on, the media inquiries. This one at the last board meeting, it was actually the members themselves wanted to keep to the policy that the board members do not speak with the press, that those inquiries actually come into our public information officer, kind of as was discussed earlier in the education committee meeting. And so we kind of give direction with that. Again, pointing out that, you get into trouble when you express a personal opinion. They don't always see it as a personal opinion. I think it's the board's position. And then just referring the individual, kind of giving guidance to the member that they would refer the call to the public information officer. Okay. Any questions? All right. Then the last item there was the service of lawsuits. This was actually something that kind of came up just recently. We've had a lot of these, and so we wanted to just give guidance to the members as to what they're supposed to do on this. It's not really controversial or anything. It just kind of gives direction for board members, and this would be really good for new board members as they come on board to let them know, you know, when you get those, go ahead and call the office, call the executive director, provide the information to her, and then go ahead and send that up. So it's just kind of giving guidance on that. And then there were just some minor clerical edits on page exec 5-17 cleanup.
You know, on the service of Sue, that not only did a certain party go to my council office and serve it on the city clerk, but the person hung out in front of my house until I came home.
A person came to my house too.
And served.
So the personal service individuals.
Yeah, did personal service.
Yeah.
I just took my husband and he said he wasn't taking it. She put it in the car. He kept driving and it was on the ground. She had to go pick it up.
Right, so members, I'll take responsibility for most of this stuff. I'll take responsibility for most of this stuff. Under the service of lawsuits, my concern with the members is rather than get into a confrontation about whether or not it's proper service or not, go ahead and accept it, and then we'll make that fight a little bit later as to whether it was proper or not. So that's sort of the instructions given there. As Ms. Kirkmeyer suggested in the last meeting, we had some concerns over, you know, who could meet with who and all that sort of stuff, and whether a meeting was proper or improper. So that is at the top of page 516 is an attempt to address that situation. The media inquiry, I think, Dr. Levina, one time during the last meeting, you suggested we have sort of a bright line rule, if I recall, or guidelines, and so I think the bright line rule that we came up with was to essentially, if you get a media call, to refer it to the PIO. So with that, just to make the walk around here worthwhile to get on this side of the table, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
We would actually need a motion to approve this, and it is the authority of this committee to approve this, and we would make these final edits and then get out a revised and final copy of this to all of the board members.
So, go ahead.
I'd move to accept these edits.
Are there any questions from board members about any of these edits? And I really appreciate what our new PIO said this morning, which is that despite the best intentions, as you described, you may get accosted in this grocery store by a member of the press, and I think common sense applies, and we need to be courteous and gracious and be clear about what we can and cannot say on behalf of the board, any of us. So, and I think your approach and trying to anticipate what we might be assaulted about is very helpful. So, thank you. Any members of the public want to comment on any of these changes to the Administrative Procedure Manual? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And I would also say that handing this to a new board member is not an orientation.
Exactly.
And so there are pieces of this that really need to be called out. And my boss believes that you don't retain something until you've heard it the 17th time. So don't worry about. 17. That's what he says. 17. He's pretty smart. So so that we shouldn't worry about repetition. I think being a new board member, I'm pretty cognizant of how intimidating an experience that was, and we need to make it easier for folks to understand the world we operate in. So thank you both for doing this.
And maybe this is something when we do the annual review of the committees, because I think we have that in the strategic plan, maybe it's just something we want to bring forward at that time to go over with everybody, just to point out the ones maybe we've had trouble with in the last year. So that's an option too.
And the, in particular, pages 518 and 519, an annual reminder of board member training requirements and board member responsibilities, just by handing it out, and we'll all read it. Okay, great. So, and update on the strategic plan, Ms. Kirkmeyer.
All right. If you would turn to tab 6, you'll find on pages exec 6-2 to 6-50 an updated strategic plan. As requested at the January 31st, 2013 Executive Committee meeting, each objective has been color-coded to indicate the status of each activity within each objective. Blue indicates the activity is completed or ongoing. Green indicates the activity is being completed as scheduled. Yellow indicates that the activity is not overdue yet, but it is nearing its completion date. And red indicates that the activity is overdue. In addition to the color coding, each objective has been updated to indicate the status or completion of the activity. All activities are now included into this new document. I know before we weren't including them unless the due date was forward, but now with this new method, we've included everything in here. The chiefs of licensing, enforcement, and legislation will continue to indicate during their committee meetings or during their program strategic plan or during their updates where the items they are discussing tie to the objectives of the strategic plan so the members know the items are being completed. Several of the objectives will be dependent upon the issues that have been presented in the Sunset Review Report and whether legislation is drafted based on the issues brought to the Senate Business and Professions Committee. Staff will be monitoring the Sunset Review process in comparison to the board's strategic plan and will see what items need to move forward after the Sunset Review, the bill goes through. 2 activities in Objective 1.1 and 1.4 have dates that have changed due to the Federation of State Medical Boards Maintenance of Licensure project. The board cannot move forward until their pilot programs gather more information. And I'm pointing those out because usually I don't change the dates if we're past the dates. But in these 2 circumstances, I didn't really feel that it was appropriate for us to get hit for something that actually was completely out of our control. So we've actually moved the dates in. It won't match what's in our actual strategic plan online. Again, with the Sunset Review process, the BREEZE project, and other pressing issues, some of the objectives have a red indicator. However, with the completion of the Sunset Review and the hiring of a new public information officer, it is believed that these items will be back on target or completed within the next couple months. The members also asked for more of a project line chart for each objective. This type of chart will be worked on and provided at the July board meeting. That was similar to a Gantt chart is what you were looking at, I believe. It is our hope that the document with the color coding provides at least an easier view of the status of the strategic plan. So do any of the members have any specific questions on any of the objectives? Okay. If not, we will continue to provide an update at each executive committee on the progress with the color coding of each of the objectives so the board knows how it's meeting its goals and objectives.
And
that's it.
Thank you. And finally, the final agenda item is update on the Sunset Review hearing.
Okay. And Dr. Levine, you can feel free to pitch in wherever too.
I'm going to start this off by saying the good news is that I can honestly report that the legislature has a great deal of interest in the Medical Board of California, and was evidenced by a full hearing, a hearing room full of members of the public as well as staff, and well, we had pretty much the members of the committee were on the dais. Their questions were thoughtful and probing and not easy. And we are in the process, the staff is in the process of preparing responses to the full, we were, in the time allotted, we were asked to speak to a subset of the issues that the members of the committees of jurisdiction called out. And that took up almost an hour and a half of testimony. It is only a subset of those questions, and staff is in the process of finishing up a full and complete response to all the issues raised. And I believe that report is due next week. We have another week for submission of that. Board staff is completing that, and I'll have a chance to review it in the next couple days. And then we will submit full and complete responses to the committees of jurisdiction, both the Assembly and Senate B&P committees.
I wonder if it would be of interest to the members of the board to see the level of questions and the answers thereof that have been. I think it might be an exercise of I would be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. We have you've seen the questions. I sent that out prior to the hearing. It was the 39 issues.
Right.
And just to let everybody know, 20 of those issues were ours. So I know everybody gets kind of concerned about the number that we had 39 issues, but 20 of those were ones that we had actually brought up in our Sunset Review report. So I did want to point that out. But we've prepared all of the responses. Dr. Levine will be reviewing those as the board president to finalize those. As soon as those are done, we will send those out to all of the members when we simultaneously provided that to the Senate B&B committee.
So the questions and the answers and the ones that we specifically wanted to address should be noted as such. I just think from an educational, the 17 times you hear things repeated, then you remember. I'm waiting for that 17th time.
I couldn't agree with you more, because almost all of them in there are things that we've talked about at the board level. So
mine's 117. I'm sure Renee would agree.
And then, as Ms. Simoes stated, our Sunset Bill has been introduced, and we await the language we have provided to the committee on March 5th of 2013 on all of our issues. So that will be coming out with the next amendment on the Sunset Bill.
And my understanding is the bill itself currently only contains the date.
Exactly. Just to continue us.
Okay, any specific questions for Ms. Simoes? Ms. Kirkmeyer? Great, thank you so much. So for members of the executive committee, just to give you advance notice that I'm planning to schedule an executive committee meeting the morning of Thursday, April 24th. It will be essentially a closed meeting for the members of the committee to begin the 25th, sorry, you're right, Thursday the 25th, prior to the beginning of the panel meetings, to begin the process of the ED evaluation. Ms. Shipsky and I will be a committee of two looking, and we will, prior to that meeting, we will review the form we used last year, the form that's been sent out by DCA this year, and to see which, if any, or whether we want to make any modifications. We will distribute that to executive committee members prior to our meeting on the 25th and ask you to take a look at it and fill it out. We'll have a discussion on the 25th, and then we will, between the 25th and the July meeting, we will ask Ms. Whitney to come up with some goals for the next year, and then we will meet again on the in executive committee at our July meeting, finalize the evaluation, and meet and complete the process.
So just as a question as to logistics, to do it Thursday morning versus Wednesday evening, are we going to have time for the board meeting? Is that going to afford you?
Apparently, yes. So panel A begins, we're going to meet at 8, panel A begins at 9:30, and panel B begins at 10:30. So we will have time.
How did you work that one, Ms. Dobbs?
They always have that. They don't seem to have any issues, panel B.
We get along. So the answer, we looked at both of those and felt that it would be easier for folks to not be held to coming down, have to travel on the afternoon of the Wednesday to get there for an early evening meeting. So we're going to do it.
If our executive director says we're going to have enough time, I'll take her word for it. Okay.
Okay.
I know you guys were just trying to schedule a 7 o'clock meeting.
And I want to assure the members of the committee that legal counsel has briefed Ms. Shipsky and myself on what we can and can't do in closed session. So we will adhere to the strict definition of what.
Spirit of the law.
And the letter, yes. All right. Are there any agenda items that folks want to raise for the next committee meeting? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting adjourned.